We just were in that situation where the players that we had, who we had to protect, there had to be somebody to make available. And my final decision was that we had to protect our younger players. I mean,
so that was David Poile yesterday, and asking a question, or Jared Stillman asking the question, David Poile on the response. And the thing that got everything going, Joe, was with all due respect, you don't know as much as I know, referring to the expansion draft process. And, what David Poile is saying there is, I had some conversations with Seattle and felt pretty good that if I didn't protect Tanner Jeannot, they were probably going to select Tanner Jeannot. And that is the way that the Predators went about it. They protected Tanner Jeannot. Calle Jarnkrok left exposed. And Calle Jarnkrok now a member of the Seattle Kraken. I thought, that was a question that if Jared did not ask, I was in line to ask. That was the question that I wanted to know yesterday. So I think a very fair question by Jared Stillman. The reaction on Twitter, I think, just like to have fun at Jared's expense. But I thought it was a good question by Jared yesterday.
Well, so this exposed a few things. One, I have to take a bit of responsibility for the Preds Twitter, blow up, because and this is a problem with Twitter. I mean, David Poile, like you said, all due respect, you don't know as much as I know. And then he said, in terms of, Seattle, blah, 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 So my tweet was, all due respect, you don't know as much as I know, ... Then went to, there had to be somebody to make available. My final decision was protect our younger players, okay? So if you just read the beginning of Poile's, which I think was a slight dunk on Jared, but if you just read those words, it reads a little bit more like, you're an idiot, shut up. That's not the tone. I mean, I don't think that would probably ever be David Poile's tone.
No.
So right there, it was already a little, and a lot of things get Twitterfied like that. And so, I mean, I guess I could have tried to stretch it out and clarify there more, but people went nuts with it. But the bigger takeaway for me is, like, anyone else asks that question, anyone else has that interaction with him in the Preds Twitter universe, and it's like, yeah, good question, all right. And instead it's like, wait a minute, I love you again, David Poile. Yes. You got mad at Jared. And that was silly. And look, if Jared's other question was about – now, Jared's other question included, like, asking Poile, like, what his superiors think of him, which, of course, no one would answer.
Right.
But it was also fine, and, and it's that was basically the lack of return on big investments in players. Everyone wants to know that, right? Everyone has that question. I mean, we all know what the situation is. But it's just, I think Preds Twitter, look, I understand, Jared's takes. I understand that I've sat with Jared on his show and made fun of him for an entire show about his Arvidsson hatred years ago. I mean, this is, so, like, I get that. He has some takes that you have every right to dunk on. But, man, I mean, you go from everybody's mad at Poile, and things have gone a certain way, and is he on the hot seat? Is he not on the hot seat? What's going on? What's the direction? And because Jared's the one involved, all of a sudden it's like, you do a 180. So I think that's a Preds Twitter fail. And I think Jared, and I need to do this in the very first segment because hopefully he's not listening. He gets a lot of bad rap. People go way overboard with this stuff. We've talked about this before, but it's like, okay, we can all have fun, but Jared does a good show. And I tell you what, go around to any market in this country, okay, and find – most markets have some particularly outspoken sports talk hosts. There's a variety of different approaches and personalities. You will not find a ton who approach it like Jared does, who then show up and ask the questions and make themselves accountable.
Right.
I mean, I know for a fact. I go to Detroit, and in Michigan, there's some people who take and just fire away, and they never show up to anything. They never put themselves in the crossfire, and Jared does consistently. So you got to respect that. Now, later we have a segment where I will rip the hell out of Jared to make me feel better about saying nice things about him.
It's about balance here on the show.
Yeah. Well, usually it's more just – usually it's trying not to –
mention his name.
To talk about him too much because he said something the day before that I was like, what? But we'll get to that one later.
Yes, we will.
But I mean, again, like the whole thing is, Preds fans. I mean, there's like shooting the messenger is always a thing.
Yeah.
But with him, it's like ready, fire, aim, and just. I mean, it's. I don't know. And look, I mean, I suppose he's earned that to a point. Michelle was asking me yesterday after the show. We were talking about like Jared and Preds fans. I'm like, yeah, I mean. He got introduced, when was that, a couple years ago at Bridgestone? And
yeah,
pretty hearty boos in there.
Yeah.
Which, of course, he was like, yes,
Yes.
It's an interesting relationship.
It is an interesting relationship. And look, those are fine questions, I thought, yesterday. To your point, the second question about basically the ownership and how they feel about the job he's done signing these long-term contracts, like, I don't know what David Poyle's supposed to say there. He's not going to answer that question. So
yeah, but
it is what it is. It's not. I mean, I didn't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the question, but you don't really expect anything to come from that one. I thought the first question was absolutely fair. I mean, when they protected Tanner Jeannot, we came in here Monday morning and we spent 2 hours talking about why in the world did they protect Tanner Jeannot. Now, we talked about maybe David Poyle knows something that we don't in these conversations with Seattle, and some clarification on that yesterday. It sounds like David Poyle, if we take him at his word, knew something that we didn't know.
Well, to your point about you were going to ask that same kind of question, I'm sure a lot of other people were too. And I do wish Jared, because I was going to specifically ask, did you get information like that led you to believe that? But he eventually got to that. And so I asked a question for Vingan about Richardson and Good Branson, who sadly for you,
yeah,
Good
tough day.
Good Branson, no more playing hockey.
Lost Callie
for the
Yarncrook
Preds.
and Eric Good Branson in 2 days.
Yeah, it's tough. Also, the questions about the, Jared threw that in, but then Paul Skrbina asked later too. The what's the relationship going to be like? How do you feel about? Which I mean, I think about that stuff, but I also actually agree with what Poyle said, which is basically, are people professionals here? I mean, that's not what he said. I'm paraphrasing, but it's like,
Yeah.
you're a pro hockey player, and I agree with the idea of maybe you'd use this. Maybe it helps you. I think a lot of athletes who reach this level find every little slight they can find.
Or just look in the mirror and say, yeah, I need to play a little bit better.
That too.
I was not on the protected list. You're still here. Maybe play a little bit better. And then you won't find yourself in these situations. That's probably the way that I would approach it. It's just me.
Yeah, if your approach is, I'm mad at David Poyle and I'm going to go sit in the corner and pout, then you're not going to be in the lineup.
So the NHL draft coming up today, this is going to be pretty interesting in terms of there's a lot of information out there on some players. There's not very much on other players that are draft eligible this year. And Elliot Friedman came out with a piece last night, and the general manager anonymously quoted to him saying, somebody on Friday in the first round is going to take somebody that we have in the fourth round. And you're just going to be like, how about that? Could be an interesting NHL draft tonight.
Not a bad year to maybe send a few picks to someone else and get a few for next year.
Maybe so. maybe a popular route that teams try to make happen tonight. And as we know, the NHL draft always a pretty active time for trades as well. So we'll see if anything happens on that front tonight with the Nashville Predators and whether or not any more trades are made. And speaking of trades and or potential acquisitions, Elliot Friedman was on yesterday with Darren Donegan Chase and threw out a very interesting name that maybe the Predators could be in pursuit of. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Today and every day for your viewing pleasure, nice up-close shots of Robby Stanley and Joe Rexrode today.
Okay, so here we go. Yeah. All right, so if you're watching the live stream, here's the zoom. Here's the shot on the, just normal. Now, let's see how much it improves.
Joe Rexrode is placing a stack of books underneath his laptop.
One difficulty here is that I still have my wife's, extra keyboard because the T still doesn't work on my keyboard.
Well, now nothing else does too, but yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, yeah.
Because I destroyed it.
That's a good point. I was trying to forget that. Okay. Yes, I don't know. It doesn't really help it that much. But you can now see my the Riv shirt. The Riv, great place in East Lansing, Michigan.
There you go.
I think this is like my flag football jersey playing for the Riv. So,
how long of a flag football player were you?
Well,
that stretched into the 30s.
No, that wasn't like a consistent thing. I think that was like a game for charity.
Okay.
Now in college, legendary, legendary. Career. Find me another college newspaper quarterback who led a touchdown drive with a cigarette dangling out of his or her mouth, and I will.
Then you can talk.
Yeah, I'm trying to meet the other person in the world who's ever done that, but distinguished athleticism.
That's right, distinguished athleticism for sure for Joe Rexrode here on the show.
It doesn't help that much. I'm sorry.
Well,
you look at
you
it.
said it would.
Yeah. Well, how about if we go like here?
You're just gonna hold your computer the whole time.
I'm sure there's a really good stream right now.
Sure it is. Talking Predators, the NHL draft coming up tonight, the first round. Predators at 19th overall in the draft tonight. We'll see what happens on that front. But free agency beginning next week as well, July the 28th, the official date for free agency beginning in the NHL. And Elliot Friedman, who joins Darren Donick Chase every week, was on with the guys yesterday and had some very interesting comments about a familiar player out there that the Predators may be interested in and may decide to pursue. Here's what Elliot Friedman from Sportsnet had to say yesterday on Darren Donick Chase.
You said the Predators may be sniffing around or kicking tires on Landeskog. I'm just going to ask you, with what you know, we all know he's a tremendous player, but we also talk a lot here about these long contracts. And, really, for the most part, if we're just being honest, they haven't worked out. And I think it's a scary proposition for any team. I would love to go back and look through the history books and find out how many long, 7, 8, or more year contracts, how many of them really worked out when you get towards the end. But if it was 7 years, would you sign Landeskog for a 7-year contract at, I don't know what number you're going to throw out?
Well,
would you do that?
It would be I think it would be a big number. That's one. I like Landeskog a lot. I really do. I think he's got a great reputation around the league. He's the captain there for a reason. Like Nathan McKinnon is a really intense, driven guy, and he's a very intense guy around their room. And I think Landeskog does a really good job of helping manage that, which is really important. Your captain kind of has to be a buffer between players and coaches and each other sometimes. I think they haven't broken through, but they've been a very good team in the last few years, and he's a key part of that.
So that was Elliot Friedman discussing Gabriel Landeskog, currently of the Colorado Avalanche, the captain of the Avalanche, potentially available as a free agent and potentially something that maybe the Nashville Predators could be interested in pursuing. Joe Rexrode, Gabriel Landeskog, I believe, is 28 at the moment. He'll be 29 next season on November 23rd. Obviously, has been very productive the last few years. He's a very good player. Do you like the idea of maybe pursuing Gabriel Landeskog in free agency? Would you rather save the money and avoid signing anyone to long-term contracts at the moment? What do you think about the idea of Landeskog being available and that the Predators might decide to pursue him in free agency?
Well, let's put Landeskog on this team next year. What is it?
I don't think it's a ton different. I mean, I think he's a very good player. I always am hesitant with guys like him because, don't get me wrong, he's very good. But let's just look at these numbers for a second. 53 points in 2015-16. Let's go even before that. 59 points in 14-15. 53 in 15-16. 33 in 16-17. 62 in 17-18. And then all of a sudden,
that's the year that that young team played the Preds in the first round.
All of a sudden he gets to 75. And then 44 in 54 games, which is pretty good. And then last year, 52 points, 54 games. All those things are good and sound great. It also coincides with the time that Nathan MacKinnon is absolutely lighting things up.
That's the
and
best.
He spent a lot of time playing with Nathan MacKinnon.
It's the best line in hockey.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that Gabriel Landeskog isn't a good player, because he's a very good player. And quite frankly, he does some things that a lot of forwards on this team haven't been willing to do the last few years. So that part of it's good. And if they signed Gabriel Landeskog, I think he could come here and be a good player. But he does not have Nathan MacKinnon here. And that, to me, is a big difference. It's a big difference in terms of production, because people are going to look, and he's going to come in here, if this were to happen, and they're going to say, wow, he had 52 points in 54 games last year. That's almost a point per game. 44 points in 54 games the year before that. He's a point-per-game player, essentially. And that is not going to happen here, not with no Nathan MacKinnon. I'm just here to tell you. So that's a big risk to take on a long-term contract.
Yes. Now, I like what Friedman said about Landeskog in the room, and obviously you love the idea of another leader. You're losing so much of that. Even with some of these young guys, you have a good captain in Yossi. You still have some veterans, of course, and you got some young guys who are showing good intangibles. But a guy who would come in and not just be a potentially great player, but be a big voice sounds appealing. But what's the number? I feel like this is going to be a classic example of someone being overpaid because of earning it, production. He's been a heck of a player. But like you said, you can't ignore what he's been a part of and how much that's benefited him. I mean, it's always tough. It's different, trying to compare hockey to other sports. But I think of Bud Dupree is going to be so interesting here with the Titans, because I don't think there's any doubt that he has benefited, from playing with other great players, especially T.J. Watt. Different deal. It's not a perfect comparison. But I think, Landeskog doesn't strike me as someone who's so good that in any situation he can just take over and produce and put the puck in the back of the net. I think MacKinnon is that guy.
Yes. And look, it's not like they've just played exclusively together. There have been times where Landeskog's been on a different line. He's still been good. He's played some with Kadri this year. So it's not like it's just been exclusively MacKinnon. It has been a lot MacKinnon that he's played with. And that line of MacKinnon, Landeskog, Rantanen, I think if it's not been number one in the NHL the last few years, it's certainly been up there in terms of best lines in hockey the last few years. So, look, if I'm the Predators, I would absolutely kick the tires on it. I would see what the price would be. I want to say he was making $4.5 million per year during his last contract. That's going to go up significantly. Now, how far does that go up? And also, you still do have to pay Philip Forsberg. So are you going to be paying Philip Forsberg $7.5, $8 million a year, whatever that number is, and then turn around and pay Landeskog $8 million per year, and then pay Johansson and Duchesne $8 million per year? It just seems to me like the approach that I would take if I'm the Predators is probably just let this one slide and then figure out what you've got in your young guys.
If you had a choice, you were a GM and you had a choice, whatever, 5-year deal, same money, right now for Forsberg or Landeskog, who would you take?
I would take Forsberg.
I would too.
Yeah.
I would too.
I think it's close, but I would take Forsberg.
I think Forsberg, well, he's younger.
Yeah.
For one thing. But I actually think he still creates more for himself when he plays that way than Landeskog does.
I do too. Now, somebody's immediately going to say, well, Landeskog had 34 goals, 75 points in 18-19. Forsberg's never approached 75 points. I hear you. Again, Nathan MacKinnon, pretty good. You put Forsberg with Nathan McKinnon, those numbers that we've talked about with Forsberg of 40 goals and point per game, I think he could get there with Nathan McKinnon.
Forsberg was on a line that not too long ago was one of the best in the league too.
Yep.
Ryan Johansson and Victor Arvidsson were his partners. Good players. But again, let's compare that to Landeskog.
Right. It's a little bit different. Especially, I mean, with both guys. Not only McKinnon, but Rantanen as well. Pretty good player. So we'll see what happens. We're just a few days away from free agency in the NHL. Landeskog looks like he's going to be available. I'm honestly surprised that the Avalanche have not found a way to make this work. He is their captain. I know that he's taking a hard line on money, and he's probably looking for $8 million, $8.5 million. To me, that's a lot of money for Gabriel Landeskog. And I don't know. Maybe in the 11th hour, Colorado finds a way to figure it out. But if he hits the free agent market, it's a big name out there in a year where there's not a whole lot of big names in free agency.
From their perspective, I understand how things went this year. Very disappointing, but I mean, I want to run that back.
Yeah.
We know all about running things back and how that can go, but I'm
running that team back.
I'd feel awfully bad about losing him right now.
Yeah, I would too. And that's a big loss if that happens, and we'll see what they do with the money if they're not able to pay Gabriel Landeskog what he wants. When we come back, we will get back into the Texas and Oklahoma discussion. Who stands the most to gain? Who stands the most to lose by Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Landeskog is very clearly a B player. Signing B players to A contracts is a bad idea.
B player?
That's what Jared said.
He's texting you?
He is.
It's not handcuffs. Yeah. I don't know who texted in at 7 o'clock or why. I may need to respond to 7 p.m. Big Ten is about academics. Rutgers was brought in for academic research purposes. Okay, dude. You.
Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Texas and Oklahoma, all the buzz yesterday. We talked about it a lot here on this show, potentially joining the SEC. The Big 12 agreement that they have, the grant of rights, expires in 2025. But Texas and Oklahoma seem to be very serious about joining the SEC, and to the point where there was a Big 12, conference call yesterday, and Oklahoma and Texas representatives were not on it. And we know that, Joe. I mean, sometimes, as you said on Twitter, sometimes that Zoom link can be very hard to find, and Oklahoma and Texas just magically didn't find their way on the Big 12 Zoom link yesterday.
Yeah, it's tough. Well, we've all missed some, right? Well, we've all had our issues. The Wi-Fi is a little wonky.
Yeah.
There's so many things that I'm sure it's just a coincidence that those are the two who weren't on there.
I'm sure it is too, with everything swirling around. So it looks to me like this is going to happen. And I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but just looking at everything that's been circulating, the conversations that we had yesterday, and the more information that's come out, it looks like Texas and Oklahoma are on a path to being the next two members of the SEC. And there's been mixed reaction to that. We had a poll question yesterday that was a little bit over 50% shaded to no, they don't want to see Oklahoma and Texas come into the SEC. But the reality is the money that could be involved here is going to ultimately speak louder than anything else. And I think Oklahoma and Texas are going to find their way into the SEC. So if that happens, Joe Rexrode, I ask you, who benefits the most from Oklahoma and Texas coming into the SEC? Which is who are some people, some programs, some leagues out there, the money? What when you factor in everything that happens and how not only this could affect the SEC, but really college football and college athletics as a whole, who benefits the most from Texas and Oklahoma making the jump to the SEC?
Yeah, it's a good question. We did a roundtable at The Athletic with some of our SEC writers, including me, about this very topic, and struggled to come up with winners other than, like, competitively. I have a hard time finding that. Now, someone mentioned, well, okay, maybe now, G. Allen Taylor, who covers Florida for us, was like, maybe the number 5, number 6 SEC finishers, because of ridiculous strength of schedule, have resumes, that they could get them at-large bids in this expected 12-team playoff. But I don't know. I don't really – I mean, to me, you're pushing everyone down the pecking order. So competitively, it's way more, to me, way more losers than winners. I mean, I guess you could say Alabama's a winner, because Alabama is still going to beat the crap out of those two teams. So now their schedule just drive me. Like I don't see either of those programs coming in and shaking things up at the very top of the SEC. So, hey, now Alabama, you are still the best, and you are now in the ultimate super conference. So if this happens, then I think the super conference model happens. And the winner is just the SEC is the winner. Hey, look, one thing I've always been kind of impressed by and sometimes puzzled by is I feel like, especially in this league, there is this root for the SEC, right? SEC.
There's a lot of that.
And there's, SEC Big Ten, always been a rivalry. Well, it won't be a rivalry anymore, not on the field. Like the Big Ten, there's nothing the Big Ten can do. I suppose, if they finally, after decades of trying, if they were to get Notre Dame, then that's a good ad. But what kind of leftovers could the Big Ten get in terms of powerful, football brands and programs that actually can compete at the highest level to even come close to matching this? I mean, I can't think of anyone. Now they could, get Kansas and have a better basketball league.
Yeah.
But that's not helping you in football. So the winner is the money. Everyone's going to get the money. The money's going to go up. It's going to be ridiculous. And it's taken the first step in this thing that really we've been talking about. Go back to 2009, 2010, when the first huge round of realignment happened, that super conference model and breaking away and just doing your own thing, and basically, Peter Burns from SEC Network kind of tweeted this idea out. Basically, like, Saturday NFL. I mean, that's if you have great games every week. So would you say that the fans in general are winners? I think you could make that case. If every week is a great game and your team can lose 3 games and get into the playoff. But I also think some people would look at that and say, man, that doesn't sound like college football to me.
It does not. That hurts me to think about.
So you don't like that at all?
Part of what makes college football so great to me is that every game actually does matter, right? Like, every game in the regular season means something. And this is going to be what happens, so I'm just going ahead and embracing myself for it. But we're going to a 12-team playoff. I know it's not official yet, but it's going to happen. Texas and Oklahoma are going to be a part of the SEC. It's going to happen. And I think that there will be teams, once the 12-team playoff comes around, you will have some 3-loss teams that get in there. You'll have some 3-loss teams that somehow fight their way to, if not the national championship, maybe the Final Four. And then it does have that NFL feel to it, which, again, there's nothing wrong with having an NFL feel to it. That's what college football, I think, deep down wants, because they realize how successful the NFL is and how much people enjoy watching the NFL, and they want to be more like the NFL. They won't say that, but they do. They want to be more like the NFL. As someone who has grown up with college football being my favorite type of football, like, I love the NFL. I've always loved college football more. This, to me, and what's going on right now in college sports, kind of feels like the death of college football, and you're moving into a new era. I know it's not, it's a little dramatic, and I realize that, but what I'm saying is the college football that I know and love is not going to be the same. I'm not saying that it's necessarily going to be worse. I just don't know. And it's not going to be the same as they move forward. And the idea of 3 teams getting into the playoff, even if the playoff is 12 teams, and I realize that just bothers me.
Yeah, you have 3 SEC teams, you're saying?
Well, 3 lost teams.
Oh, 3 lost
3
teams.
lost teams.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That is what, to me, part of what makes college football so great is you got to almost be perfect. Like, you've got to win every week if you really want to compete for a national title.
I hear what you're saying. Now, let's remember that a lot of the ability to go undefeated or have 1 loss or whatever is that you have 4 games that are a joke.
Sure.
That are charged full price and are on TV. I mean, this SEC tradition of, like, the week before rivalry week where everyone goes out and finds the weakest FCS team they can just bludgeon.
Just tune up.
It's like this is a non-football weekend. I hate that. But then the counter to that is, so if you're not playing those programs as much and you're not basically funding their athletic departments because they get huge guarantees to play you, to basically come in and be a tomato can, what is that going to do to those programs? And I mean, it's hard because
Sure.
I don't want to see, group of 5 programs suffer and things like that. But I'm old enough to remember, and I don't love like Dabo's thing about, let's go back to the polls deciding. But I am old enough to remember when, teams used to get ripped for their non-league schedule, not being all other, like, it wasn't called Power 5 then, but like, high-level opponents. It used to be that you played good teams in your non-league schedule, and then you played your league schedule, and it was competitive football every week. And some teams still found a way to have a good record. And again, that's the whole – it's just a different model. It does appeal to me to have more conference games. Could we see 9 SEC games? Could we see 10 SEC games?
I think 9 is a
that.
certainty. I think 9 will happen.
Yeah, I think you're right. And 10 probably. I mean, again, this is where coaches will be like, so you want my players to have to play 10 games against other,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different factions here. There's a lot of different people, a lot of different stakeholders. Ultimately, the stakeholders who matter, are the people in charge. The coaches are going to do whatever they're told. I would also say another thing about this whole thing, to me, because I know a lot of people look at this like name, image, likeness, and all these things happening, the transfer portal, it's like it feels like it's this. But this story is, to me, another example of why we're so overdue on name, image, likeness, I mean, let's call this what it is. It is a massive money-making industry, and so I'm glad that at least that has come.
This is a
into
money
play.
grab by Texas and Oklahoma. They don't want to get behind the 8 ball in the Big 12. I mean, that's what this is.
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't blame them, but that's what this is. So, to your point, good thing name, image, and likeness conversations are starting to really come in the fold now, and that this is now legal because it's all about money.
Well, and another reason to me, like everyone should just let it go.
Yeah.
People are making money. Bryce Young's making $1 million. He hasn't done anything. Great. Okay. He lives in America.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
So they're winners, but they already were. And I kind of look at this, and I hope this is maybe a little reminder for everyone. Let's not be complete hypocrites like we've been for a century.
We'll continue this conversation when we come back, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Don't miss the first ever Smashville Summer Spectacular presented by Lee Company, featuring something for everyone in the family today through Sunday. Preds giveaways, ice making seminars, job fair, Nashville locker room sidewalk sale, photos with the King Clancy Award, which was won this year by Pecorine, and the Norris Trophy, won last year by Roman Yossi, and much more. It's a free event, plus enter to win lower-level half-season tickets. Visit NashvillePredators.com/spectacular for full event details. This is a weekend that you don't want to miss. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezevic here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, talking Texas and Oklahoma potentially joining the SEC. We're going to have Jason Kersey from The Athletic join us to begin the 7 o'clock hour. He covers the Oklahoma Sooners. And taking your thoughts as well, got Magooks tweeting in on Periscope. Texas troubles me, an athletic program known for selfishly throwing its weight around in a conference. Does that concern you, Joe Rexrode, that Texas, to Magooks' point, it kind of is an animal all to itself? There is a lot of power that Texas holds in that state, in the Big 12. Would they try to hold the same amount of power in the SEC? My guess is yes. Does that concern you if you're the SEC about Texas in particular? I think Oklahoma maybe to a little bit lesser degree on that front.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that, and I would tend to agree. Texas has been not a very good partner for various schools. They have not played nice in the sandbox. And now, you talk about like out-of-hand boosters and stuff like that. Seems to fit in perfectly in this league. Yeah. But maybe it's even a different level. So, yeah, I think that's one of a lot of things that a lot of people around the SEC are expressing reservations about. It's just my question is, and again, you always talk about this in terms of you got to have 11 of the 14 schools to approve this happening. Is that enough of a concern? Is anything enough of a concern to get anyone but Texas A&M, who we know is trying with all its might to make this not happen, and is going to have politicians, legislators? I mean, there's going to be a lot of opposition to this. But are there 3 other schools that would actually vote against this? Because when it gets to that, Greg Sankey and everyone, they're gonna have a lot of convincing things to say about it.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. David texting in, it's a shame for schools like Tulane, who is battling to get back to relevance. This will likely destroy the AAC that had made some big strides. This is coming from David in Murfreesboro. So talking about Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC and what that could lead to down the road, maybe being bad news for some group of 5 teams like Tulane and the American Athletic Conference. This could be very bad news in terms of competitive balance. I would say it's already bad in terms of competitive balance, but this would probably make it a whole lot worse.
Yeah, competitive balance, I mean, it's a myth. It's what it is.
Yeah.
And now, look, you get the UCFs who can – or you get the Cincinnatis, and that's great. I want that to keep happening. The tough part is, financially, if you just have fewer opportunities to play these games that fund your programs, that would widen the gap. It's already big. I love, though, that we now still have some programs. And look, so let's take this to the super conference level. Is Cincinnati potential consideration for the Big Ten? I mean, geographically, it makes sense. And I don't know that. The thing that you always have to remember here too is ultimately it's the presidents and the chancellors who are making these decisions. And as much as we laugh, like academic profile, the Big Ten has made a big deal out of that. Now, how
big a deal? Is that why they brought Rutgers in?
Well, no, that's hilarious. I don't know what happened on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and I don't have a name on this, but like last night at like 7:30, someone texted in that like the Rutgers was brought in by the Big Ten for like academic research purposes, which is awesomely, hilariously stupid. Yeah, they were brought in because of cable television subscribers in New York City, period. Now, did they have to fit the academic bill? Yes, like that was part of the chancellors were you better find people who, because they talked about other programs at the time, including actually Oklahoma was a Big Ten. They're like, you're out. They don't rise to the Big Ten level of academic, rankings, U.S. News and World Report, whatever. A big thing is the AAU being a part of that organization, for example. So, like, it's a thing, but is it the thing that makes you do it? No. Money is why you do it. Big Ten and everybody else.
I would say so. But that academic research that Rutgers provides is very, very beneficial.
I'm sure it's very good.
I'm sure that it is as well. I don't know. I look at this thing in terms of suffering the most. Like, obviously, and Group of Five is a different discussion, and we'll have that a little bit later in the show. But just on the field, if you're in the SEC, like I think a team like Tennessee is a perfect example. If this happens, your journey, your job, your efforts to get back to relevancy in this conference just became that much harder, right? I mean, if you're let's just operate under the assumption that it's 2025 when this happens, and it may not have to be that long, and we'll get to that a little bit more coming up to begin the 7 o'clock hour with Jason Kersey. But let's just say it's 2025 when Texas and Oklahoma comes back in. If you're Heupel, like, you've got basically 3 years to build this program up to a place where you can start to recruit pretty well. You can start to at least have a solid foundation in trying to get back to a competitive place in the SEC, which is hard enough as it is right now, obviously, as we've seen if you're a Tennessee fan. And then you throw Texas and Oklahoma in there as well. Your journey just got pretty difficult, even more difficult than it already is if you're a team like Tennessee or like Ole Miss or like Kentucky or whoever's trying to take that next step. This is going to be very, very difficult with Texas and Oklahoma coming in.
Yeah, I mean, and that's roundtable we did, of course, the question of losers, and I brought up Ole Miss and Tennessee. We talked about it yesterday, but Kentucky's another good one to bring up. Stoops has done a heck of a job with that program. And, 2 years ago, right? I mean, in a 12-team playoff situation, they're playing Georgia in a huge game. Now, of course, that team also got thumped by Jeremy Pruitt and company, which is bizarre. You got to be able to throw the forward pass. But point being, he's built a heck of a program. He's done more there at Kentucky than I would have thought possible. And that's a program that in a year you build up to a veteran, senior-laden team. Okay, in this 12-team playoff, you got a chance. But now, again, just go down 2 pegs. I mean, Texas has been very average, and on the field,
sure.
I've seen some of that too. Like, are you sure you want Texas? They haven't been very. Yeah, it's about money, and that has not faded at all. They are still as powerful as anyone. They have their own network, which gives them their own $15 million a year from that. So yeah, Texas is still as powerful, but on the field they've been very average. I would expect them. I mean, at some point, it's like you have to stop screwing it up there, right?
Well, you would think.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, Sarkisian, I don't know if he's the answer or not.
Maybe Sark's the guy.
Well, maybe. If not, then it's Bill O'Brien's turn in like 3 years.
Yeah, maybe so. Just keep
He'll get
cycling through Alabama offensive coordinators.
Yeah, but it's still going to – I mean, you're right. I mean, it's just competitively, it's not good. And again, I mean, I don't really like it either. I mean – the super conference thing, I like the idea of better games if it happens. I don't feel like college sports is ruined or college football is ruined. I think the sport will be the same. I think it's still like I go back and forth between two. I like college football or NFL better. NFL's the highest level. But I think college football, like the passion around it, and yes, even the creativity of the game and the schematic differences between stuff like that. I love that. That's not going to change. Like, none of that stuff is going to change. But it just, I mean, the last realignment was some weird stuff that we're still living with. And then you get used to it and it becomes the norm. And I just, when something like this is basically just purely like you have to do it because our checks are going to be way fatter and we're going to make $20 million more per school than any other league. Like, I understand why fans look at that and say, okay, what about us?
When we come back, we'll be joined by Jason Kersey from The Athletic, covers the Oklahoma Sooners. We'll get a little bit deeper into Texas and Oklahoma potentially joining the SEC coming up next You're listening to Robby and Rexrode live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com. You're on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 2 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Going to have Call Your Shot Friday coming up later this hour at 7:45. So go ahead and get those called shots in on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. We are efforting Jason Kersey from The Athletic, who covers Oklahoma. So when we have him on the line, we will get straight to that. Texas and Oklahoma apparently looking to join the SEC, and by all indications, Joe, I think this is actually going to happen. Like, I looked at it a couple of days ago, and I just started to kind of laugh because I thought, okay, well, that would be something, but I don't think there's really any chance that happens. And the more that things have played out and the more things have happened, and obviously at this point, with Texas and Oklahoma not even hopping on the Big 12 call last night, I mean, there's pretty obvious signs that they want to leave and are going to leave the Big 12. The SEC seems like a natural landing spot for the two of them. I think this is going to happen, and I think there could be a situation where this happens before 2025. And I was reading something that Andy Staples put out yesterday at The Athletic. You know, the grant of rights agreement between the Big 12 and Texas and Oklahoma, it goes through 2025, but you could get out of it. I mean, there are legal ways that you could try to get out of it. It would probably cost you a lot of money in the short term that you would then hope, if you're Texas and Oklahoma, to make up in the long term by joining the SEC. So this could be something that happens sooner rather than later with Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah, or it could be, or you could have these years of awkwardness.
Yeah.
Probably something in between, because there'll be some kind of buyout. But it's interesting. Staples' story breaks down. They have a different sort of thing with these grant of rights, so that it would actually be really potentially costly. And of course, everyone would try to make it very costly.
Sure.
My colleague Seth Emerson, friend of the show, covers Georgia. I mean, he's not sure yet, that this is going to happen. And the point he made, it's a good point. 11 years ago, it was a done deal. The Pac-16 and with Texas, that was done. And then the Big 12, and the Big 12 was going to be nevermore. It was just going to dissolve. That was more than a decade ago. It didn't happen. It got saved, and of course this was after A&M makes the huge move, and Missouri, but A&M is the big fish there, makes the move to the SEC. So there's going to be the Pac-16, and then the Pac-16 was going to be the first super conference with Texas, and then everybody else is going to have to fall in line and take leftovers. I mean, and look, the Big Ten absolutely targeted Texas also back then. And the Big Ten's plan was Texas and Notre Dame. And again, at that point, different than now, at that point it was all about cable eyeballs, but from either perspective, cable or what's really important now, your brand name and your fan base and all the financial might you bring with a particular program. But from every angle, Texas, Notre Dame, schools like that are incredibly valuable. So Seth's not. He's like, let's wait and see, on this. And having Texas as a partner, that's something Texas A&M is going to talk up big to these schools. If it comes to like this tug of war type situation with Texas A&M on one side and then Sankey on the other. And I'm presuming that Sankey is very motivated for this to happen. We don't know. He hasn't said anything. And a big key about this to remember, too, also as Staples brought up in terms of lawsuits, is the indications are that Texas and Oklahoma went to the SEC.
Yeah.
If it were the other way around, then tortious interference becomes a thing, and then we can all be legal experts. But that basically,
what was that word?
Tortious.
That's awesome.
Yes. I mean, I can't say sciatica, but I can say tortious. But tortious interference. That was in a movie. That was in a movie that I love. Someone tell me. I know someone on the text line can tell me. That's in a tortious. Oh. You ever seen the movie The Insider?
No.
Oh, man. Such a great movie.
When that one come out?
A while. I mean, you're talking 20 years ago, but I think Russell Crowe won the Academy Award. It's the true story of basically the scientists who took down the tobacco industry.
Yeah. Came out in 99.
Yeah. Tortious interference. It's a fantastic movie for everybody who hasn't seen it. Big. Can't recommend it enough.
Maybe I'll put that on the list for this weekend.
Yeah, let's give that one to Porth, too. We'll make that Porth's list a little bit longer. All the movies he hasn't seen.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Jeff from Cottontown texting in. With the SEC having their own network and Texas having the Longhorn network, would Texas have to give up that network? I'm not sure on how all that works.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, and this is another reason. So the ESPN affiliation here is important because that's what Texas, that's what Longhorn Network is.
Yep.
SEC Network is. ACC Network is. So it works out in terms of.
It is not what the Big Ten Network is.
Right. The Big Ten has gone the Fox route, and they still have other. They still have an ESPN deal, but they are primarily Fox. So if you really want to look at Texas from a TV standpoint and making this work, it's way more helpful to be going to a league with an ESPN deal. So I don't know if LHN will I imagine it would still exist, and they would just work out the numbers. And that's another thing,
And then Alabama will immediately get their Crimson Tide network.
Yeah, see, that's stuff like that is interesting. I mean, if you really look at this whole thing too, one thing I was thinking of is Nick Saban rightfully could be like, I should be getting more of a cut. We should be getting more of a cut than you all.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's kind of like the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Even though they're very average on the field in the NFL, the Cowboys get the same cut the Jags get. But Alabama, it's been very collegial, really, in the SEC when you look at performance and who brings in the revenue. So then, if you bring Texas in, does that change? Texas A&M is going to talk that up till they turn blue. There's no doubt.
Let's go back to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Ben texting in. According to the experts on ESPN, this will be a great benefit to the elite SEC programs and horrible for the bottom feeders like Vandy all the way up to Tennessee and South Carolina. Do you buy that this is good news for the top of the SEC and bad news for the bottom?
I don't really. The bottom just gets that much longer of a road to make some magical run.
Right. I don't know that on the field, though, LSU is celebrating having to play Texas and Oklahoma if this happens, or that, Texas A&M, certainly we know where they stand on this. I don't know that Georgia is all that happy about, cool, yeah, let's keep adding that schedule and put Texas and Oklahoma on there.
Right.
I can't imagine that they're just excited about that.
They're already scheduling Texas and some of these things, which is great. But now it's now I have to play them.
Right.
No. And look, the recruiting aspect of this, you talk to anyone who closely follows recruiting, SEC, it
just means more.
Well, it does. It means something to recruits, and that's a big counter for LSU and A&M and whoever, Arkansas, going into Texas and recruiting against Texas. But we're in the SEC. Well, now you take that away. I don't see how the top of the league or the big winners. It makes it tougher for everyone. As badly as Oklahoma gets, bludgeoned in the playoff every year because they can't stop anyone, they're still gonna, they're gonna give some people some L's that they wouldn't have otherwise had because they're gonna score 50 on them in some of these SEC games. So I kind of reject the idea that this is, again, other than the money. And I also do think, when you think about the money, I think that maybe there's a little more likelihood that there's I don't want to say panic, but the name, image, likeness thing, there are college administrators who are fearful that, booster dollars that were just going to them now maybe get diverted a little bit. Maybe you have to ease up on some of your facility plans or whatever. You're not sure exactly how the money there. In some cases, it's just going to be a choice. So that will be cited here. Okay, but now we can get to this and we can get well beyond any other league, and we won't. We're going to have these rights deals are going to give us another $20 million per team in the league or whatever it is per year, and we can absorb whatever name, image, likeness takes away, and then some.
ESPN 94.9 is the official English radio home of the Nashville Soccer Club. Listen in tomorrow night as Nashville. We'll get your thoughts on Texas and Oklahoma potentially joining the SEC. Is that a good idea? Do you like Texas and Oklahoma potentially coming into play here in the SEC? Let us know on our text line and our phone line as well, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Join 102.5 The Game tomorrow from 5 to 7 p.m. for the Nashville SC pre-match party at the Hard Rock Cafe downtown. Party before the match on Broadway and get some game swag, plus register to win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC home game. Then head over to Nissan Stadium for the 7:30 match. Get your tickets now for Nashville SC at NashvilleSC.com and tune into the match on ESPN 94.9. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, discussing Texas and Oklahoma potentially joining the SEC, looking more and more likely. And if you missed it yesterday, the Big 12 had a conference call, and Oklahoma and Texas not on that call, which you would think there would be somebody that you could just put on the call, like even with all these things swirling on, but not on the call yesterday from Oklahoma and Texas.
Like send like the assistant SID or something.
Something, yeah.
Hey guys.
Hey, what's going on?
Everybody else who makes decisions here couldn't make the call, but how are you?
I'm here.
What's going on?
What would you like to talk about today? So what happens now to the Big 12 if this happens? Because obviously, there are some marquee programs there, but these are the two, Texas and Oklahoma, that really are the faces of the Big 12. You've got Kansas in basketball. Baylor's a good school. It's not like there's a shortage of good schools in the Big 12. But if you lose Texas and Oklahoma, to me, you're pretty much up a creek if you're the Big 12 at that point. If this happens and Texas and Oklahoma leave, what happens next to the Big 12? Do they fold? Do you try to just go out and bring other people in and hope to survive that way? What happens? How do you compete with the money that's going to be then in other conferences if you're the Big 12 and you lose Texas and Oklahoma?
Yeah, and well, before answering that, let's also remember, to me, it seems like a huge part of this is that the SEC, of course, just made this massive TV deal, which here's another thing where, I think for the fan, kind of a little bit sad, but like the CBS game is going away. They're going to be on ESPN, but it's a lot more money. And so that deal's made. Meanwhile, the Big 12 is basically told, like, we're not going to make the deal yet. And the projections are just that it's going to be way lower. Sam Kahn, who covers the state of Texas for us at The Athletic, he quoted a source that was like way below that. So to me, that just looks like the starting point, like Texas, Oklahoma saying, so what's this going to look like for us 10, 20 years down the road if this gap is going to happen? And again, competitively, if you're Oklahoma, I don't know that this has anything to do with the resources, but they do get the crap beat out of them every time they're in the playoff. I mean, again, I don't think that's a resource thing. It's just like coach defense. I don't know. But now the Big 12, TCU, Baylor. I mean, these are good, great basketball. The Baylor, obviously, defending national champs, and actually, like good football programs that I think have benefited from that move. Texas Tech. I mean, Patty Mahomes is from there. I mean, but
Excuse me, Patrick.
Yes.
Apologies to Mahomes' mother, Patrick
Yes.
Mahomes.
But I mean, like, so what's the Big 12 going to do? I mean, are they going to exist, or is the Big 12 going to be picked at like a carcass? I mean, if this is going to be 4 16-team super conferences, then I suppose the Pac-12, the Big 10, and the ACC will take the leftovers from the Big 12. But even that, so I don't know, what's the Pac-12 do? Is geography going to be anything? I mean, I'd probably try to make it something, I guess. So, like, does the Pac-12 grab
Clemson?
Wow.
Just really stretch your footprint of the Pac-12.
Oh, there you go. Why not? Get out of the ACC. See, I think that's funny. I mean, the Pac-12 right now, at least can now not be last in terms of football. Pac-12 is a very good all-around athletic conference, by the way, for anybody who cares about that sort of thing. Well, they should, but to me, but football is king. So the Pac-12, I mean, really, like Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, and does the ACC take like West Virginia, I mean, like, there's, once you get past these two, just from the brand name perspective, it really is a lot of
Yeah.
And this is why when you talk about, I mean, look, I think it's going to happen. I think it's too far down the road. I think money drives all of this and is going to drive this. But there is incentive for the Big Ten and the ACC and the Pac-12 and obviously the Big 12 to fight this as much as you can possibly fight it. The only way I can think of is, maybe the 12-team playoff doesn't sound so great, Greg. I don't know. I don't know if I like that 12-team playoff. No, but again, the counter to anybody who's trying that is like, okay, so let me do the math. Here's a calculator. Here's how much money we make if we do it, and here's what's going to happen if we don't. Because obviously there's a lot of concern about the sport right now. With the 4-team playoff and the same teams in there every year and all the focus on the playoff and even the things that you said you love, which I agree with, kind of being diminished by this development.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's any question about that. And also, like, I think you got to kind of be looking around if you're a team like Notre Dame too, right? Because you've been independent for so long, other than last year where you had to join a conference. They're already talking about, like, if you make the college football playoff, if it expands to 12, you're not going to be in the top 4 because you're not in a conference. So they're already, like to me, that's worth considering a conference anyway. You get a bye at that point in a 12-team playoff. And now you've got Texas and Oklahoma potentially joining the SEC. I think it starts to make more and more sense for Notre Dame to join a conference, whether that's the ACC, whether that's the Big Ten, whatever the case may be. I know Notre Dame fans, there's a lot of hesitation to that. They like being independent. They like doing their own thing. But to me, the more I think about it and I look at the picture right now, I think it makes a lot of sense for Notre Dame to join a conference. That's just me.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. And there's the example where I'm saying everything is like leftovers out there. Certainly not. That would be the other obvious big fish for people to pursue. But it could be the 4-16 power conferences and Notre Dame. That could be, I don't know. I hear what you're saying because the way the playoffs set up, why not, take away that disadvantage? But their TV situation, obviously, it's been in place for a long time. They don't share it with anybody. They like that. It's worked out pretty well for them. But yeah, that's a really interesting aspect of this to follow. If it keeps going the way it's going, would they consider? And then who? I mean, I would think the ACC. I mean, they've kind of built up. Not that. I mean, we know that tradition just gets thrown out with all this stuff, right? I grew up loving Nebraska-Oklahoma games. That was one of the biggest games of the year.
Yep.
That doesn't happen anymore, and won't now either. Tradition gets thrown out the window, but I mean, Notre Dame has sort of built some little rivalries here with the ACC. Of course, they also have that with a lot of Big Ten programs too. So it's one of those two if they pick one.
Let's go to our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Gator Tim texting in, Mike Gundy is now the happiest man in America. Now maybe he can win a conference championship. So the most disappointing part about Mike Gundy lately, I think he shaved the mullet. I think the mullet's now gone at Oklahoma State.
I saw pictures of that, and it's just weird.
Needs to come back.
What are you doing, Gundy?
Now that the mullet is actually coming back in style, Gundy moves away from it. He's a man. He's, at this point, what, 54? He's not 40 anymore.
God, that was that long ago, huh?
Let's see what he is.
Yeah, he's probably 50-something, right?
53.
There you go.
He'll be 54 in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, will he win a conference championship? If the Big 12 says we will trudge on and we will bring SMU, you're in the Big 12. Houston, you're in the Big 12. Cincinnati, Memphis.
Yeah. What happens to the Oklahoma State game too?
Like,
I mean, do they go Clemson, South Carolina on us and play every year, even though they're not in the same conference?
Bedlam, baby.
Yeah,
They better. What about that though? What about Cincinnati, Memphis, Houston and SMU, and then you're actually the Big 12 again.
Yeah, you have 12 teams.
Because, you're right now, you're the Big 12
with 10
of
teams.
10, and the Big 10 has 14. Awesome. College sports makes a ton of sense. What about that, though? I mean, this could be big for Memphis.
Yeah.
What about UCF? Does the ACC say, you know what, let's go?
Maybe, but like if those things happen, do those programs get elevated from what they are now significantly enough to make a big difference money-wise, or are you just at that point saving face, but you're really not being competitive as a conference? I don't know what the answer to that is. That's the question that immediately comes to mind.
I mean, I would still think that the Big 12 with – I mean, a lot of this is like TCU and what they've done under Patterson. They have improved their brand. Baylor, I mean, my gosh, Baylor football, and obviously they've had tons of issues too. The whole Art Briles disaster, and
sure.
But in terms of like football brand, those two give you something. Oklahoma State gives you something. Iowa State, Kansas basketball is great. If you add, I mean, I would think that would be an elevation for Now, how much of one? I don't know. It would certainly. You would not consider the Big 12 on a power conference. It would be the next best thing after the four big ones.
Right.
But I think it would then still be if you added like Houston, that's a program with some good upside and some performance lately. You'd be like the next best program. You'd get some kind of a bump from that if you're at Memphis or Cincinnati or wherever.
I think so too. I think Houston, I'm kind of surprised they're not in the Big 12 already, to be honest with you. It makes a lot of sense geographically, and honestly, they got a pretty good football program, very good basketball program as well. Like Houston, it makes a lot of sense for them to be in the Big 12.
Well, and SMU, look, I mean, it's Dallas, and it's there's a lot of money in Texas, and again, name, image, likeness, things like that, big metro area. Could you benefit? Could your brand, could your recruiting, all that benefit from that?
Coming up next, we'll continue the conversation and ask this question. If super conferences happen in college football, what does this mean for some teams here locally? We'll get into that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Once again, a little Blink-182 to bring us back in here on the program. A great song chosen by Michelle Knezovic. You like the Down, don't you? That's a good song. It's on the Greatest Hits album of Blink-182. Joe, have you purchased the Greatest Hits album of Blink-182 yet?
The Greatest Hits album. That doesn't exist.
It exists. Not only does it exist, but I will pull it up for you now. I've got it on my phone.
I mean, that's like that. That's such an oxymoron, isn't it? Blink-182.
Blink-182, Greatest Hits.
Greatest Hits. Okay. Oh gosh.
Yeah, buddy.
So Michelle's already trolling me.
She trolled me yesterday with Florida Georgia line.
She didn't know she was trolling you though.
Oh, she did at that point. She knew.
This is after we talked.
Oh, she knew.
Right. Well, that's good. I like that. Get right in there.
That's right. Now we've just got to find some musical artists that she doesn't like. We have no power to play them. Yeah, she has all the power.
We need to learn.
We can figure something out.
Yeah, we need to learn more about who do you hate.
I gotta think on that.
Okay, think about popular artists that a lot of people like that you think are awful,
like the Beatles.
Yeah.
No.
The god awful Beatles. Like Creed, for example. I mean, I don't know how many people actually like Creed, but the fact that
apparently a decent amount did.
Yeah. I mean, I was very disappointed in my coworker Sarah Sivian, who apparently is a huge Creed
super fan,
fanatic.
Yeah.
So, but something like that. I'm sure there's somebody.
I'll report back Monday.
Okay. All right. Make that a weekend assignment there. Yeah. Think that through. I've got a lot. I could go on and on.
I'm sure you do.
But the triumvirate of suck is actually now Blink, Bush.
Oh, they made it.
Blink, Bush, and Creed. Yeah, I think I said this before. I've taken Live out of there. I've got a friend who kind of talked me into Live doesn't suck as much as you think they do. So
you're letting other people influence your decisions.
Yeah.
Of your triumvirate of suck.
But it's someone who's musical taste I respect.
Okay.
And
so not me, clearly.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But it was an impassioned plea for Live. So I'm not a fan, but I thought, you know what? Because of this show, and all the Blink that's been played on here, I thought, you know what? I'm gonna replace Live with Blink in the triumvirate of suck.
Okay, all right.
There you go. I need to go to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com.
Okay.
So I mentioned the Rutgers thing, right? So someone was like, the Big Ten added Rutgers for their academic research capabilities, and we're wondering why that was on the text line last night. So Xavier on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com, says Jared was making fun of Rutgers at the tail end of his show yesterday, which is where that text came from, I think. Well, I appreciate that, Xavier. And I may be wrong. You may be a different Xavier. But yesterday on Twitter, Xavier, I'm going to find this, Xavier Thompson got into this whole Preds Twitter battle with Stillman. Okay. And actually had a good defense of Jared. Basically, essentially he said, he asked questions that, fans want to be asked. So, give him some respect, which I said, yeah, I appreciate that.
Hey,
good
level-headed person on Twitter.
But then Xavier says, and I'm reading this tweet exactly, quote, "For me, there's not much difference between Rexrode and Stillman. Stillman is louder and more obnoxious, but Rexrode is very fractious sometimes, and they have very similar bad takes and opinions."
Yes.
So,
well said, Xavier.
Blocked and reported, Xavier. Absolutely ridiculous.
Well said.
But thank you for the Rutgers clarification. I'm not surprised. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Jared had the take that Rutgers was added because of academics. Actually, that sounds like a Jared take.
Josh on the text line says, play Billy Ray Cyrus. I don't know if any of us need to be exposed to Billy Ray Cyrus.
We'll do Miley Cyrus before Billy Ray.
Little achy breaky heart.
Yeah.
You heard that one?
I have heard that one. Yeah. Thanks.
What do you think about that one?
Thank you. I mean, it was played a lot in bars in 1994. I can tell you that much.
Sure that it was. Joe, talking about the addition of super conferences. If Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC, there's one. That's definitely a super conference at that point. If these happened in the world of college athletics and the Big Ten follows suit, the ACC follows suit, almost said Big 12, the Pac-12 follows suit as well, what does that do for college football? And specifically, what does that mean for a program like MTSU here locally that obviously is not going to be a part of one of those conferences? If this happens in college football, what does this mean for a group of 5 programs like that?
Well, I think, like, if I'm a Chris Massaro or somebody in that position, I think one thing I worry about is, does it then keep going? Again, we talked earlier on the show, the NFL model. I mean, 12 is a big jump from 4. And a lot of people are like, wow, you're not going to go 6 or 8 first? Frankly, I think it's forward thinking of them to be like, you know what? Do the 12. Let's have access. And again, Greg Sankey's a big driving force there. And Greg Sankey's thinking is, you know what? We keep giving access to other people while I want it so that my conference, the best conference in football, can get a bunch of our teams into this playoff, okay? As things stand now, the access is still supposed to be there, right? I mean, the way it's set up is you do have access points for a group of 5 teams who are good enough. And I'm not saying MTSU has that on the horizon. You know, I mean, have they over the years had any teams that would have – they've had some good teams, you know, but they haven't quite, you know, been at that level.
No.
But at least there's that – I mean, I think when you have at least that possibility, like if we win our league, you know, we could potentially be in a playoff. You know, then I think that, you know, you still have that as a possibility. But the concern is – do you have fewer opportunities to play Power 5 programs because the Super League scenario, is there just a demand for, you know what, everybody's going to 10 conference games now. Everybody's going to 10 conference games. And listen, if that's the case, then the coaches in those leagues for the other 2 games that they get to schedule, now, I mean, I think they'll schedule light, but that's still only 2 games for each team, right? I mean, I just think opportunity and just the gap widens. But I think everybody probably saw one way or the other that was going to happen, right? I mean, the financial gap is just – it's not going the other way. So I don't know that it's necessarily – you know, devastating or anything like that. But I think the concern is that this does become kind of more like the NFL. And again, like from a fan perspective, fans of Power 5 programs, great. If you have more games week to week to week that count, that are good competition, but bad for the programs that just frankly need those guarantee games. And the guarantees now, you know, in some cases are like 1.2, 1.3 million. I want to say MTSU, when they went to Michigan a couple years ago, I think they were right around there, 7 figures, I believe. You know, if you cut down those opportunities every year, what does that mean for those programs? How much bigger does the gap get?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And also, and I think this is less of a concern, I think, with a place like MTSU, but there are programs out there that, I mean, they rely largely on some of these non-conference games against the big boys to fund their football program.
No doubt.
Like if these are gone, or at least maybe not gone, but if they're limited, how big of an impact does that have on lower level college football? I think it could be a pretty big impact. So that's also going to be interesting. And I realize, like, if you're the Power 5 and this much money is on the table, like you can't base your decisions off that. So I get that. But that is, I think, it could be an unintended consequence of all this is you could see some football programs throughout the country that are lower level run out of money and not be able to keep going. I think that's a real possibility with all this.
Right. And you know, and you think about MTSU in particular, it just stinks. Like, you know, Virginia Tech was coming here, last fall, and obviously we know all the things that got spiked last fall. But like down the road, do those opportunities happen? Does a Virginia Tech, if they're, you know, in this 16-team league that's mandating, you may be right. Maybe it's 9 is more likely, like the 9-game model for the SEC. People have thrown out there with pods. I mean, it makes sense, but I could see the push for more, even though coaches are going to be against that. Even at 9, it's just one less week that a team's going to, you know, want to schedule a game like that. And then also, if the playoff is expanded enough, the top programs, there's still going to be a demand of you got to at least schedule one good game from one of the other leagues. So, yeah, I think that ultimately that just add up the numbers, and there's just not enough opportunities, not as many opportunities.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Carlos texting in, do you think Memphis could make it into a super conference? I don't know that they could make it into one of those 4 super conferences, but if the Big 12 starts to dissolve a little bit, could probably make it into that, would be my guess, as you pointed out earlier.
Yeah. I mean, the SEC is locked up, so you think the ACC is coming over here to take Memphis? I don't
Probably not.
see it. I think there'd be quite a few programs more attractive to the ACC. So I would say definitely no.
Philip from Spring Hill texting in, as a Notre Dame fan, I think it's absolutely time for them to join a conference, and it should be the Big Ten. As far as terrible bands, I can't stand White Zombie. Finally, my wife used to tutor Miley Cyrus when she was about 10, so I blame my wife for her behavior. Thank you, Philip.
There is a lot going on with that text.
There is.
A lot going on with that text. White Zombie. I like a little White Zombie.
What do you think about Notre Dame joining the Big Ten?
Well, it's always made the most sense. I mean, they have long-standing rivalries with Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue. I mean, God forbid geography becomes any sort of a consideration. And, hey, fans can drive to these games. I mean, I love your idea of Clemson in the Pac-16. That just
put them in there.
Fantastic.
On the Atlantic coast. Put them in there. Be good.
Hey, what's a 5-hour flight versus a 2-hour flight, you know?
That's right.
The student athletes will study on the plane.
When we come back, it's time for Call Your Shot Friday. We need your bold predictions in the world of sports. It could be with the Titans. Training camp starting next week. The NHL draft coming up tonight for the Predators. Free agency as well. Nashville SC. Everything is on the table on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game.
sports weekend has arrived. You know what that means. It's time for Call Your Shot Friday with Robby and Rexrode on ESPN 1025 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
And it is that time of the week, time for Call Your Shot Friday here on Robby and Rexrode. We need your bold predictions in the world of sports on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Joe Rexrode, do you remember your called shots from last week?
Well, I'm looking at them right now.
There you go.
That's why I write things down. Although, well, we'll get to Porus and what I failed to do. Chris Paul scores 30 and the Suns win Game 5. Nope.
Did not happen.
Calle Yarncroke to the Kraken.
That one did happen.
Yep. Yarn Kraken. Who came up with Yarn
Calle
Kraken?
Yarn Kraken. I don't know if there's a name attached to that yesterday.
That wasn't Keith? That
No, it was
one of
not Keith.
Keith's specialties?
It was
Okay.
not Keith.
I also have USA MBB wins gold, so we will continue to monitor that. Michelle, Booker has 40 and the Suns win. Also a big no on that one.
He did
Although
have
he did have
40,
40 in that game.
That's right. So you got half right. There you go. You got half right. And then USA men's hoops will not make it past the quarters, and specifically will lose to Czech Republic. So we will monitor that. Robbie, you had 4 last week. You had Chris Paul with 25 or more and 10-plus assists in Game 5.
Didn't happen.
You got Tannehill for more than 4,500 this year, so we got to remember that.
Yep.
You got McGregor will never win another fight. I think that's a pretty safe bet, but that's a long-term one. And then you also have Yarn Kraken. So Porth has Seth Jones and Ryan Suter will both end up with Chicago.
Yeah.
But then I have XXX because he said something and I didn't hear it clearly, and then I meant to ask him after and I didn't. So he said XXX will win the British Open. Anybody remember?
No. I don't remember.
Let's just say he was wrong, okay?
Well,
He's not here to defend himself. He was wrong.
considering that I think the British Open, is that this weekend? Or did that happen last weekend? I can't remember.
That was last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm just
We're gonna assume he's wrong.
Yeah, you were wrong, Porth. Okay. So there we go.
So now it's today's edition of Call Your Shot Friday. Are you ready? Michelle Knezovic, are you ready?
Heck yeah, I'm ready.
Michelle, would you like to go first? Your called shots for the week are what?
Okay, I have 3. Okay.
Okay.
First one is that boy Calle Yarn Kraken
Yes.
has a hat trick against the Preds
Ooh.
in their first game.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yes.
I like that one.
By the way,
we have to remember it.
schedule was
But I
out
like it.
yesterday. Nashville Predators opening the season at home against the Seattle Kraken. So
What?
Michelle calling a hat trick in that game for Yarncroke.
Real fast. Will he get a tribute video?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's
He will.
good. Yeah, I mean, it's a like heck of a role player for a long
It
time.
won't be like 2.5 minutes long like Shea Weber's was, but yeah,
Yeah.
25 seconds, somewhere around there.
I
Yeah.
like it. We got to remember that.
There you
we
go.
got to remember this called shot.
That's right.
I'll remember it. Yeah, what's my next one? Oh, I don't think that the Big 12 is going to fold. Okay, so Oklahoma and Texas will go to the SEC,
Okay.
but the Big 12 won't fold, but the American Conference will.
Okay. So could be death of the American Athletic Conference coming up.
All right, that's a
That could happen.
that's a good shot.
All right. One more.
Last one, USA Women's Gymnastics. Simone Biles will win gold in every event, and they'll win the team of gold.
Gold in every event for Simone Biles, who Joe Rexrode has dubbed the greatest athlete in the world, and USA wins gold as a team as well.
Well, I might go greatest athlete ever.
I agree with
Maybe.
that.
Maybe. I don't know that I'm willing to go that far, but maybe.
She's up there, definitely.
She's up there.
I will, if you want me to go on my gymnastics rant. And I've covered a lot of gymnastics, including the Fierce 5 in 2012.
Okay.
They do things that normal people wouldn't even try to start doing, or you can break your neck, let
I agree.
alone what you do.
I agree.
Also, you're alone with everyone watching you. You work your entire life for these moments where you are alone performing.
It's extremely difficult.
It's so far beyond really anything. I mean, I've had the argument with a buddy who's like, yeah, but hitting a baseball. Like, I'm sorry, man. You can stick your bat out and you might just run into a slider. you will not do anything in the balance beam but kill yourself. So that's my rant.
There you go.
I agree.
Joe Rexrode,
Thank you.
Call your shot Friday. Today's edition for you.
I got one.
Okay.
Texas A&M gets Missouri, Tennessee, and Ole Miss to oppose. There are threats elsewhere around college athletics of this 12-team playoff not happening, and this all turns into a false alarm. Horns down, MFers.
So they're not coming to the SEC.
That's my called shot.
That's
I
your
mean,
called
we're
shot.
supposed to be calling shots. I don't know that I really believe what I just
Well,
said,
but
I'm calling a shot.
Okay, I like it. My called shots for the week, Mikhail Granlund is not signed by the end of the first day of free agency. I think a lot of Predators fans feel like this is going to be really quick and simple. And I'm not sure that it is. I think this could take a minute. So by the end of the first day of free agency, Mikhail Granlund is signed nowhere. He's not anywhere at the end of the first
Oh,
day.
what a panicky day that'll be. And hey, if the talks are in purgatory,
Yeah, I mean,
it's not
you just-
easy to get just right out of purgatory.
Well, and kind of an underrated part of the press conference yesterday with David Poyle was working on Holla, working on Granlund. Really kind of said he didn't anticipate anything getting done in the next week and that maybe they'd have to see what their other options were too. So that's a interesting development between the Predators and Granlund and Holla. So we'll see what happens on that front. My final call shot for the week, Nashville SC gets the clean sheet win against FC Cincinnati on Saturday. And not only do they get the clean sheet win, the goal scorer in the 1-0 win for Nashville SC will be Ake Loba. Scoring the goal for Nashville SC.
You are big
They
on
get it done.
him. You're big on him getting out there.
Well, he got out there a little bit. I think he's going to play pretty significantly tomorrow. Finds one in the back of the net.
All right. I like it.
Those are my called shots
go.
for the week. Now taking your called shots on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Jeremy texting in. Called shot, albeit a long one, Duchesne and a pair of second-round picks to the Coyotes for a cup of coffee at most. Coyotes did make a trade yesterday where they gave up literally nothing in return.
Hold on. So, Jeremy, is your called shot that, like, this is happening this offseason?
Yes.
Okay. That's.
I mean, I guess.
I mean, like in 2024, I think you may be onto something. 23, maybe.
Maybe.
That's yeah. It's not happening, but I like it.
Nate on the text line. Jared will get pounced on like a spider monkey by Vrabel at the end of the NFL season. We all saw what happened with Poyle, and he was trying to be nice. We all know Vrabel won't take that approach, especially if they're in a slump at some point. Again, I don't think what happened with Poyle was that big a deal.
I'm gonna say this again. You're a sports fan, and you want your people who cover your sports teams. Do you want them to ask relevant, tough questions or not? I feel dirty right now defending Jared to this extent, but there are a whole bunch of talk radio tough guys who do not show up at press conferences and do not make themselves accountable the other way. So have some appreciation. And that's it. I feel, I need to take a break now.
Frank on the text line. My called shot. Forsberg doesn't sign this season and walks in free agency after next season. We'll see. We got another shot about Forsberg as well.
I think that's possible.
Dylan on the text line saying Forsberg will leave in free agency and get $8.5 million per year somewhere else. Now, as a reminder, still does have 1 year left in his contract. So Forsberg will be, at least to start with, we think, a member of the Nashville Predators this year.
Yes, but it might be a real uncomfortable year if that extension doesn't happen.
That is correct. Caleb on the text line. Nashville will have a Major League Baseball team by 2030. So by 2030, Caleb says an MLB team is here. So we're going to keep track of this for Caleb for the next 9 years.
I thought it was happening this year.
So did I.
Right?
Get a little Major League Baseball in there? Yeah. I got a texter that says, my call shot, the Atlanta Braves, despite Acuna's season-long injury, will win the NL East, making Willie Donick very upset. So a late-season push here from the Atlanta Braves.
That's a
even
shot.
without Acuna.
I don't buy it. That's a good shot.
I like that.
Sorry, real quick. DJ Burnside in Wilson County texts in and takes credit. He was the one who did yarn cracking. Good job, DJ.
So
At first I'm like, DJ Burns, Tennessee? What? Didn't you go to Winthrop? DJ Burnside, Wilson County. Good job. You got some competition, Keith.
There you go. Cali Yarn Kraken. Now I'm with the Seattle Kraken. We'll continue to take your thoughts all show long and your called shots all show long on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. When we come back, we'll be joined by Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter and host of Talking with TD. We'll do that next. This is Robby and Rexrode, live from the Wholesale Link Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com, here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 3 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. And it is that time of the week. We go to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our good friend Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of Talking with TD, brought to you by Freedom Tire Guys. TD, what's going on, man? How we doing?
Hey, good morning. How's everything, man? Everything's awesome my way.
Everything's awesome this way as well. Appreciate you taking time to join us here today on the show. And TD, just a few days away now from Titans training camp. What excites you the most about this Titans team as you head into training camp with obviously going to be a lot of buzz around this team with Julio Jones coming in? What are you most excited about to watch at training camp coming up next week?
I'm most excited to watch the communication on both sides of the football. I think that's something to really watch out for. You got the dynamic duo, right, Mike and Scotty, and A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. And I just want to see how that communication goes with Julio Jones and Ryan Tannehill just getting on that same page, because that's something I asked him about the hype and the excitement with those two guys being together. And he said none of it matters unless we're all on the same page. So I want to see what they do to get to that point. I'm excited about that. And then the communication in the secondary, I'm really excited to see that continue from how it was in minicamp. The guys were really talking and just, whether it's an in-breaking route, you hear the corner yelling in, those type of things, or you hear Kevin Byard, saying what the motion is going to do and resetting the secondary that way. So those are all things that needed to be fixed, and it was something that Byard specifically mentioned every time he was asked about the secondary problems. So I'm looking forward to seeing those things, just how that plays out.
If there's one position battle or maybe positional surprise that you might forecast right now, TD, anything come to mind?
Yeah, a whole lot of reps for Briley Moore out of Kansas State. He's going to, I think he's going to emerge as the H-back, and he's going to, end up being in that rotation. I would say he's going to be the third tight end. That's the surprise from my perspective.
TD, the Titans come to an agreement with Elijah Molden, and we've talked to you many times. Obviously, you're very high on him. What specifically do you like about him? Why do you think that he is so well set up in a rookie season where you're trying to learn everything on the fly at the NFL level? Why do you think he's set up so well for success in his rookie season?
He's what I would call a gold helmet prospect. And when I say that, what I mean is there really aren't too many areas of question for him. And I think he's set up so well, and I wrote about this just because of how he was brought up in football. This is a guy that understood the game from a pro perspective in middle school, as an 8th grader, because his dad, Alex Molden, taught him how to watch football, how to watch film and coverages and understand situational aspects. So you have the mental part of it, and that transfers over to his ability to play in the slot. And that's something that I talked to Louis Riddick about, just the way that he could process everything and act so quickly. And he has the willingness to tackle, so he helps out from that perspective. He could cover. He could play safety if you need him there. He could be in single high center field type of situation. He could be in two high. He could come down and match up against, some of the bigger receivers. I think that's why it's just he has a complete game, and it's just he's complete from all aspects. The mental part of it, the physical part of it. I think that's really what's going to help him. And then I have to give credit to Jimmy Lake as well. Jimmy Lake, his coach at Washington, that guy is just he's a defensive back breeder. A lot of Washington guys go into the league and they do well. So I think that's, going to bode well for Elijah Molden also.
Staying on corners, and TD had an awesome story about Christian Fulton and his brother and the apparel business they've started here in Nashville. And to me, Christian is he's one of the most important players, I think, in terms of really needing, that bump. Obviously, banged up some last year. He's a rookie. You're figuring things out. What do you think his second season looks like if he can stay healthy? Is he ready to be, a starting outside corner and a plus corner, you think, in this league?
I do think he's ready to do that. And for me, with Christian, what I really like is his man cover skills. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about anymore. We talked a lot about it when he was coming out at LSU. And that's something that Mike Vrabel, really credited him with, being able to be a match kind of corner. And I say this, go watch the Alabama game if you get a hold of that. He matched up against Jerry Jeudy, held his own, and then he held his own against Ruggs. I think when you're able to do that in one game, I think you deserve credit. But I just feel that he's going to continue to develop. I know he's working hard with different trainers and getting back on course. He had an injury last year that he never even heard of, he said. And also, being under COVID protocol, he only played, I think it was, 6 games. So it never really came together for him. But he's a talented player, and I expect him to be right there in the mix for right corner as well as a nickel spot.
Teron Davenport on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And obviously, TD, a couple of guys on the defensive side of the ball that are dealing with injuries and are coming back from injuries in Bud Dupree and in Caleb Farley as well. It's a different setup this year, obviously, than last year in the preseason. There are actually some preseason games that take place. is there a timeline, and we'll start with Dupree. Is there a timeline where you'd like to see him back on the field as a full go? Is it important at all to get him in a preseason game for you this preseason if you're the Titans, or is it as long as he's close to full go by week 1, is that good enough for you? How active, I guess, would you be with Bud Dupree in training camp if you're Mike Vrabel and the Titans?
Yeah, I wouldn't have him on the field as far as like in full pads, at all during camp. I wouldn't expect him to be either. And as long as he could be there in the mix, just on the field, he doesn't have to be there participating, but on the field, I think that's fine. And I don't think he has to play a preseason game because it's not like, he's out there trying to develop timing with the quarterback. You know what I mean? It's a different situation for Julio Jones, but I think for Bud Dupree as an established veteran and a guy at his position, I think you can wait to unleash him. And it's probably the safer way to go because if you look at the timeline right before, so December to September, that's 9 months. Just a little over 9 months, and that's a good timeline for his knee to be fully back. So as long as he could be out there cutting and doing some of the things that he needs to do with Brian Bell and the training staff over there, I think he'll be fine. It's just a matter of just getting that confidence back with the mental side of it. You know what I mean, and then allowing that to roll over into the season.
So TD, pretty significant news yesterday with the NFL. Essentially coming out and saying, if you can do reschedules within the framework, that may happen. But other than that, forfeits could be a thing this season. Some pretty strong words from the NFL. And then the NFLPA statement to me kind of read like, please get vaccinated. We talked about this. I would also say it seems like there's been pretty significant progress in terms of a lot of players around the league deciding to do so. Where do you think things stand right now, and what do you think of how that all came down yesterday?
Yeah, and actually Jeremy Fowler reported this morning that it is up to 16 teams over that 85% threshold.
Oh, I missed that. So wow.
That's pretty encouraging for the league. Me personally, where I stand, I still feel it should be a personal choice, and I understand there are, inherent risk associated with not being vaccinated. But it's just tough for me to tell somebody that they have to do something against their beliefs, but at the same time, there are consequences, possible consequences. I think the bottom line is we all, even those who are vaccinated, it's a must for each of us to make sure that we're still, addressing this thing with caution and understanding that it's not gone. So that's pretty much where I stand on it. It is, it's here, and I think we just have to continue to adjust. But even as reporters, we have to get vaccinated if we want the access that we need in order to better do our jobs. So it's just there's a lot going on. I guess that's pretty much the easiest way to sum it up.
So TD, what can we find on the latest edition of Talking with TD this week?
Well, yeah, we talked vaccines and COVID just now. So I had Dr. Amish Adalja, who is out of Johns Hopkins University. He's the senior advisor there, and he's someone who's an authority on vaccines and, these type of situations that we're in, pandemics, et cetera. So he's on, and then we have Laurel Murchison talking shop, and I have Run TMC with Chris Sanders, and that's where he gives a rather awkward top 5 running back list, so definitely make sure you check that one out. I give one, too. You might find mine awkward, too, because my number 5 is his number 1.
Oh, wow. Well, that's very interesting. Make sure you check that out on the latest edition of Talking with TD. Our man Teron Davenport joins us every week here on the show at 8 o'clock. TD, great stuff as always, man. We appreciate you taking time to join us.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Take care. Enjoy your weekend.
Absolutely. You as well. TD, one of the best in the business, Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of Talking with TD, brought to you by Freedom Tire Guys. I'm interested. Wonder what Chris Sanders' running back list was.
I mean, if both don't have Barry Sanders 1, I got a problem. Real quick on the breaking news, I missed that with Fowler. 16 teams. That's pretty significant. Meanwhile, Kirk Bowles, we mentioned him earlier, Austin American statesman, been there for a long time. He says a prominent Big 12 source tells him the Texas OU move is almost done. They've been working on this for a minimum of 6 months, and the A&M leadership was left out of the discussions and wasn't told about it, end quote. Move could become official in a week. I feel bad about my called shot right now. But, man, the Aggies. What do the Aggies do? They just grit their teeth and take the check.
So is Jimbo going back to the Big 12?
Man, I
He's leading the charge?
I bet you Jimbo is screaming at someone just that into a phone right now.
I bet he is as well. When we come back, we will continue the conversation on the Titans and the NFL as well. Get to vaccinations. NFL was some very strong language yesterday when it comes to vaccinations and some possible consequences that NFL teams could face this season. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Nashville SC fans join ESPN 94.9 this Monday, July the 26th from 7 to 8 p.m. for NSC Backstage featuring Nashville SC players and coaches. Watch the show online via 102.5 The Game's Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and theGameNashville.com. NSC Backstage brought to you by Camarena Tequila, the official tequila of Nashville SC. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Taking your thoughts all show long on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. And yesterday, Joe Rexrode, the NFL coming out with some pretty strong language when it comes to vaccinations, and the forfeit word being thrown around again. And basically what it boils down to is the NFL, I mean, they're not mandating vaccines, and they did not take that step. But essentially what they did was say, hey, if you're not vaccinated and you run into some COVID-19 issues as a team this year, you are subject to forfeit. And we've talked about this a lot here on the show. I think that's the last thing the NFL wants. As you've mentioned many times, these games, not only are they heavy TV inventory, but fantasy football is involved. Now gambling is involved as well. I mean, there's a lot of different financial elements that go into this. So this is something that the NFL wants to avoid pretty much at all costs. But I said it heading into the season. There's no way, in my opinion, that you can treat it the same this year as you did last year now that a solution is at least there. And you got an option to avoid some of these things. And as we've said many times, I think there will be some positive tests of COVID-19. We've already started to see some of that. And the vaccine does not prevent you from testing positive, but it does prevent you from having some serious complications that go along with that. And the NFL making their stance pretty clear yesterday with the statement they came out with. And it seemed like, at least that's the way they made it seem, that forfeits will be on the table at this point.
Yep. And look, frankly, at this point right now, July 23rd, like a month ago, if you told me they'd be at 16 and that they'd be, well over, that's got to be pushing close to 80% on the player front overall. I don't know if there's that number out there or not, but it's got to be. It was already over 70 not long ago. If you told me that a month ago, honestly, I would have been pleasantly surprised. So I think overall it's a good response. I also, and we had TD on last segment, love TD, listened to TD some in his segment, with Jared and Caroline yesterday. And
the TD Power Hour.
The TD Power Hour. And I fully agree with his just overall approach to the vaccination question. I think that empathy is important here, with people not being sure about the vaccine. And there are totally legitimate reasons to to have reservations with something that was approved so quickly and all that.
Sure.
I'd also say, reach out to medical people and try to get good information. So I think empathy is really important, and for the most part, it's been a good conversation. And then you get a tweet like Jonathan Feliciano of the Buffalo Bills. You see this?
I did not.
Well, he's deleted it, but this is what he tweeted yesterday. And the Bills, it's just quite a scene.
It's going well over there.
Here's the quote from Jonathan Feliciano, which he has now deleted. Quote, "It's been proven that COVID was made in a lab. Fauci also a part of Pfizer. That's why people don't want to get the vaccine. Sad to come to the realization that you cannot trust the government." End quote. So, see, I have no empathy for morons. So that's where it ends. And you still have some of these things that are going around too, unfortunately. But
Cole Beasley's been on a run, hasn't he?
Has he been? Yeah. And again, like Cole Beasley, the thing is, and he's kind of like the target of all this because he's been so outspoken. Like, I looked at some of his tweets, and the thing is, there were actually a lot of people being very – of course, there's always going to be people on Twitter that are
sure.
like, "You're an idiot, I hate you," right? But there were actually a lot of people like, Cole, it is a personal choice, but it does affect things. It affects everyone else. If you get the vaccine, you don't have the mutations of the virus that now are, in some areas, filling up the hospitals again because, unvaccinated people, yes, you can test positive, but as you just said, if you're vaccinated, the numbers are overwhelming that you will not have serious symptoms. The people that are having problems are largely 97, 99% unvaccinated. It's been actually an incredibly successful vaccine. That's the real information. And then you have someone in the NFL tweeting something like these conspiracy theories that are just incredible. And that's the problem, is you have to battle against misinformation that's so twisted And then there's a real conversation in the middle about, hey, I mean, I'm just not sure. Look, I've said it before. I'll say it again. I didn't want to get my kids vaccinated.
Sure.
I was hoping the adults would get vaccinated to the extent that it wouldn't be necessary. But it is necessary, so they are getting vaccinated. And that's the real discussion. It's sad to me that, that this other stuff gets brought into it.
I would agree. Now, the question that I saw some people ask yesterday and that I still wonder from the NFL's perspective, when it comes down to it, and if you're Roger Goodell and the NFL decision makers and you're staring in the face the idea and the proposition of actually making a team forfeit a game, are you going to do it?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's still a legitimate question to me.
Oh, I think you're still doing every possible thing to avoid that. And again, you still have some wiggle room. You have some wiggle room within that to not do it. But like, if you ask me right now, will we have a forfeit in the NFL this year? I have to think hard about it. I wouldn't be shocked if there was one or two. But then again, I mean, if we're at 16, think about it. If you're a player on an NFL team, and you're sort of some people are just resolved not to get it, and that's it. That's that, and it is their choice. DeAndre Hopkins yesterday had some tweets that ticked people off. Some people that's just how they feel, and you know what? No one can make them do it. That is for sure. But if you're someone who's kind of on the fence and you're really looking into it, and I mean, we've heard this from some NFL players too. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott said it the other day. He said he grew up in a house that in general was against vaccines.
Yep.
And he decided to do it. If you see 16 right now, I mean, I think you've got to be thinking in terms of competitive advantage, don't you? Like, now you will be soon, your team, if it isn't there, will be in the minority in the NFL in terms of not being fully vaccinated. Does that spark enough response that maybe the forfeit isn't even a thing we have to talk about this year?
Well, and I think also was asked and seems like to be the case as well. Like, you could still, again, you could test positive and have the vaccine, and that will probably also happen at some point this year with an NFL team where they've got a few guys test positive that may have the vaccine. It sounds like the NFL in that scenario be a little bit more lenient when it comes to the rules and how they go about handling that situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be right. So if you've gotten vaccinated and you test, and again, it's like, so I'm getting tested Monday to cover camp, even though I'm vaccinated.
Right.
Everyone in the media, you have to demonstrate that you're vaccinated. Like, in fact, during the show, I'll probably send my little picture of my card over to the Titans, and then you're going to get the brain poke every couple weeks. So I believe that's for everybody, every 2 weeks. But if it's positive tests for vaccinated teams, it's not going to be the same thing as if you could have prevented it. And yes, if the response is, well, you can test positive with the vaccine, again, it's not just about testing positive. It's about how your body reacts to the virus, and these variants are scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's become a problem again in certain parts of the country so far, and as you said, it looks to be trending the right way in the NFL, with Jeremy Fowler reporting this morning that now 16 teams have hit that threshold. So that's good. I mean, you've still got a few more weeks before the season itself actually begins. Like, could you get to 24, 25 teams, 26 teams maybe before the start of the season? If so, I feel pretty good about things in the way that they're going.
Or at least, like, maybe, because obviously you have, I mean, there's a time element here.
Sure.
When you start the process, at least like by early in the season. And then if you're on a team that's like one of a handful, and then it gets into like the fans of that team, if that becomes known, I mean, again, I hate the idea of people screaming at people about vaccinations,
right?
And I think a lot of the discussion about this, like, I just look at it differently from, say, like wearing masks, which is not asking anything of anyone. It's just being like, being courteous of other humans. This is more than that. And the discussion does get to, like, you're an idiot, shut up, do it. But I could see it getting that way with some teams if the rest of the league is vaccinated.
When we come back, we'll continue the discussion on the NFL, including a couple of conversations that Joe Rexrode is fed up with. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Going to have Scott Burnside from The Athletic join us to begin the 9 o'clock hour. We'll get into the expansion draft, NHL free agency, all things regarding how they could impact the Nashville Predators coming up at 9 o'clock with Scott Burnside from The Athletic. So looking forward to that conversation. Joe Rexrode, you began today's show by a passionate defense of Jared Stillman yesterday in a press conference.
It wasn't passionate.
A passionate defense of Jared Stillman is how you began the show. And now, in order to have fair and balanced material here on the show, you'd like to counterbalance that by a passionate takedown of Jared Stillman. I turn the floor over to you.
I'd say you're overstating both things a little bit. But I've been – so there's a couple things that have been talking points that have been also texting points between Jared and I this week. And Jared's not the only one here, but I have to revisit. This is me revisiting my Monday rant, okay, about Delaney Walker.
Which I'm here for.
I just have to get another word in on this. People are conflating this, including Jared. But actually, Jared's problem with this. So, you know what? I should have. I screwed this up because I should have ask Michelle to have the Delaney sound again, because Jared, and not just Jared, have heard that, what he said, the clip that we played Monday and said they don't think he was talking about him in the Hall of Fame.
He was absolutely talking about him in the Hall of Fame.
What he was.
Yes.
And Jared's like, well, he's talking about Eddie and Steve. No,
he's talking about himself.
He was asked why he's going to keep playing. He said, want to win a Super Bowl, and it's sad that you have to do that to get kind of individual recognition, and then he talked about them and their gold jackets. He was talking about him and the Hall of Fame, okay? So let's start
very
there.
clearly.
Let's start there with listening comprehension. 100% clear. And again, Jared's not the only one who somehow screwed that up. But I've seen a lot of, I agree with Delaney, and I do too in terms of attention in the franchise.
Yes.
That is fine. I don't think anybody would dispute that the Titans don't get as much attention. That if we're going to use Dallas is the great example. Gosh, this morning, who was it? Tannenbaum's picking Dallas as the top contender
to
challenge the Bucs?
Yeah.
Now, is this because Tannenbaum is blinded by the star or something? Or is it just because he just has a bad football opinion? I don't know.
I don't know.
But the Cowboys, whether they're bad, whether they're good, in between, they get a ton of attention. So that's fine. And does that hurt players on a yearly basis? That's fine too. I can buy that, sure. Like Pro Bowls, things like that. And that's the only place that I'll take it with, okay, an accumulation of Pro Bowls, I guess, because you were in Dallas, and a lack of accumulation of Pro Bowls because you were in Tennessee or Jacksonville. Does that end up mattering in the room? I mean, maybe a smidge, and maybe there's some kind of unconscious bias in there for the Steelers and the Cowboys. But again, I think anyone Delaney Walker's not a Hall of Famer in any uniform. So if you said that, you're dead wrong. I think he said that. And Jared also says Eddie George is absolutely a Hall of Famer if his same exact career is in Dallas, which I completely reject. Tony Romo was brought up. Tony Romo is a great example. Big numbers, absolute superstar, talked about all day long in Dallas. No one's going to put him in the Hall of Fame. And Troy Aikman is in the Hall of Fame because he won the Super Bowls. I agree that Troy Aikman is not the elite quarterback that some of the other quarterbacks of that era were. He's not Elway. He's not Marino. But
still pretty darn good.
He was pretty darn good. He wasn't just a passenger. Also, he won the rings, which, whether it's fair or not, that is a distinguisher. There's no doubt. But just being in Dallas is why he's in the Hall of Fame? No, it's because he won championships with Dallas. So I think a lot of this is just, do you believe that the Hall of Fame committee does a thorough job or not? And I think anybody who talks to someone who's been in that room or pays attention to the process, it's so deeper than these artificial things that it's just, you got to be able to separate. We're conflating the two things, the attention and what it does to players in short term and the Hall of Fame, totally different thing. Derrick Henry, if he doesn't get hurt, he's played his whole career. He's played in that stadium at times with 35% of the fans being from the other team or whole thousands of empty seats. Derrick Henry will get in the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's because of who he is as a player. So there's one. And the other one is the Tom Brady stuff, which
I don't know that we even talked about here on the show.
Yeah, actually, I don't think we talked about it either. So Brady, again, did an interview, and this was Jim Gray, right? I think this was Brady. And
anytime it's Brady, usually it's Jim Gray.
That's true. Jim Gray, who, famously, interviewed your beloved LeBron James for the decision. So Jim Gray, Tom Brady asked, or Jim Gray asked Tom Brady again, who basically everybody's trying to get to who exactly were you talking about when you said you're sticking with that MFer, right? And so Jared's take on this is there is no question he's talking about Tannehill and the Titans. But yes, there is.
There is question.
I don't know that. I actually, if I had to bet, don't mess this up. Your house is on this. I would bet Garoppolo and the 49ers.
That was yeah.
I don't know that, but I do know that, yes, there's doubt Yes, there's doubt. He's talking about one particular team, Now, is he when he's talking about in general getting passed over and these other teams? Sure. I mean, I would think the Titans would be included in that. But that word, quarterback, I don't know. I would guess Garoppolo. Maybe he's talking about Tannehill.
I mean, it could be
possible.
Tannehill. I don't. But the point is, we don't really know who he was talking about. My guess is Garoppolo. Like, I'm trying to remember who was in the mix for Brady. You know, San Francisco. He's from there.
Well, Chicago is another reported team, and I mean, certainly Trubisky
could be that.
Now, I don't know. Like, again, I don't know where that all went or how serious it got, but there were a few others too. But Garoppolo, I mean, stands out, especially because that was a big sticking point for Brady and Belichick when Garoppolo was with him, right?
Yep.
I mean, it just makes sense. But hey, he also saw a lot of Tannehill and beat him routinely when he was with New England and Tannehill was with Miami, so it could be him. But there's doubt.
But the last time he saw Tannehill, he lost to him.
He did. And
Tannehill threw for 90 yards or whatever it was.
And yet was still better than Brady.
He was.
That night. Believe it or not. If you watch the game, you know. If you looked at the box score, you don't know.
I just love getting you fired up about that every time.
Well, I feel better because, although usually, Jared and I, we have our arguments and conversations. We kind of keep it separate sometimes. Not all the time. But I really defended him today, and it felt wrong. So now I feel a little bit better. Thank you. Thank you for letting me do that.
A little bit more balance. Dwight texting in on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. How is Terrell Davis in the NFL Hall of Fame when a third of his yards came in one season? I think it's because they like him, and he's at the NFL Network. This is coming from Dwight in Kentucky.
Right, like there always has to be some, conspiracy reason for something. You can't say it's because Denver is, one of the absolute headline markets, right, in the NFL. And they're a good brand. I mean, Denver's been to Super Bowls, won a couple. So, I mean, but Denver's not. Like, the Broncos are not like the Cowboys, Steelers, or what the Patriots have become the last 20 years, right? They're not the Packers.
No.
But Davis is
got another player that might need to keep that in mind, too. They're not the Packers.
No, that's right. That's right. Remember that, A-Rod.
See what happens with number 12 coming up in a couple of days.
No, yeah. Well, and that's the thing. So Davis is really interesting because he is – a lot of people contest that. He doesn't have the accumulation. He's got 7,600 yards. But what does he have? 2 Super Bowls.
Yep.
And a 2,000-yard season. And this is why, when I talk about Derrick Henry, when he's up and they're talking about him, we don't know how the rest of his career is going to play out. But right now, the way he's going, he's gonna get past 10K, and he's got that 2,000-yard season, which that's a big deal. It is. That's a big deal. I mean, that's a milestone achievement that's just obviously only been done by a handful of people. He also had 21 TDs that year. So, I mean, I agree. He was just so dominant for – he was
about a 3-year stretch.
Yeah, so dominant for 3 years. Just the flat-out best running back in the league. They're running that zone scheme, and he's just incredible. And then he falls off and gets hurt, and it's a shortened career. I mean, it's fair to contest it, but that's why. Rings and a big milestone. Rings are so much more on the Hall of Fame front than market. I mean, market is they are dissecting these players, again, down to every little thing that you can talk about with them.
Got a texter that says Joe's going to be like at the end of the crying game after defending Stillman. Well, that's why you feel better about this segment, because you've gone the other way now. You've gone back on the attack.
Okay. Do you understand that reference?
It's the movie, right? The Crying Game.
Okay. I'm just going to leave
that. That's a 90s movie.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that alone. I don't totally understand what the texter's saying, but I'm going to leave that alone.
Okay.
Well, let's just leave that alone.
Let's do that. Got a no, that one I already read that text. Never mind. Not going to read that one again. So I don't want to double down.
Don't read that one again.
Double down on. No, it wasn't that one. There's another text. There's got a another text that I've already read at that point. So not going to go back to that.
Anyway, have some of that, Jared.
So do you want to go back and defend him again next segment?
That's right. We're defending him next segment. Gosh darn it.
When we come back, Joe Rexrode goes from the attack to the defense of Jared Stillman with the Nashville Predators. They held a press conference yesterday, and an interesting back and forth between Stillman and David Poyle on why Tanner Jeannot was protected in the expansion draft. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
With all due respect, you guys have already punted on the long-term deal with Arvidsson and Ellis, and you exposed both Johansson and Duchesne. How do those that you report to feel perhaps about the lack of the return on investment with these big contracts?
What do you mean by that?
Tune in to Nashville Sounds Baseball on ESPN 94.9. Tonight, the Sounds begin a 6-game series on the road against Jacksonville, the Triple-A affiliate of the Miami Marlins. Pre-game show with Jeff Hem starts at 5:50, and first pitch is at 6:05. Nashville Sounds Baseball on ESPN 94.9, presented by 312 Pizza Company. They'll also be in Jacksonville over the weekend as well. Saturday on 102.5 The Game, first pitch at 5:35, and Sunday on ESPN 94.9, first pitch at 5:35 as well. So a weekend full of Nashville Sounds Baseball on ESPN 94.9 and on 102.5 The Game as well. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. And the expansion draft now in the rearview mirror for the Nashville Predators. We'll have Scott Burnside from The Athletic coming up at 9 o'clock. But David Poyle held a press conference yesterday, and not a ton came from it. Looking ahead to the NHL draft tonight as well. And David Poyle was asked by Jared Stillman yesterday about why the decision to protect Tanner Jeannot was made by him and the Nashville Predators heading into the expansion draft. Of course, the Predators lose Calle Jarnkrok. He was unprotected, now a member of the Seattle Kraken. Here was Jared's question yesterday to David Poyle on why Tanner Jeannot was protected in the expansion draft with Seattle.
With all due respect, you guys have already punted on the long-term deal with Arvidsson and Ellis, and you exposed both Johansson and Duchesne. How do those that you report to feel perhaps about the lack of the return on investment with these big contracts?
What do you mean by that?
I think I'm going to cut out a little bit. But anyway, that question went on to from Jared about Poyle, asking about the ownership group and the big contracts that the Predators have signed, whether it's Victor Arvidsson or Ryan Ellis, now with Johansson and Duchesne as well, with contracts still on the books. And Poyle didn't really answer the question. I mean, there wasn't much he was going to say on that question after that. Said he feels like, if Johansson and Duchesne bounce back, this team can still be pretty good. And he knows that they have not played well the last couple of years and that it's on them at this point to turn things around and play well. But I thought two questions between that one from Jared yesterday and also the question about Tanner Jeannot, two fair questions from Jared Stillman yesterday, and the reaction on Pred's Twitter after the first one where David Poyle essentially said, with all due respect, I know more than you know about this situation, and then went on to explain that some conversations he had with Seattle may have led him to believe that maybe Tanner Jeannot would have been selected, so therefore he was protected. Calle Jarnkrok was not. I think in a vacuum, a lot of people ran with the with all due respect, I think I know more than you know with Jared Stillman yesterday.
Yeah, well, and this is where
maybe been your fault.
Well, my tweet, it's you got limitations, you got character counts, and yeah, I know more than you know. Let me find the exact tweet, which got a lot of reaction from Pred's Twitter, which I believe would have only gotten that reaction with one questioner in town. Maybe there's others, but like for people who routinely get in the press conferences and talk to the Preds and talk about the Preds, I think just one, and it was Jared. So all due respect, here's the quote I had. So I said, David Poyle, presser asked by Stillman why I protected Jeannot, not Jarnkrok. All due respect, you don't know as much as I know, ... There had to be somebody to make available. My final decision was we had to protect our younger players. So, it's like one of those things where you're listening to him talk, you type in the stuff, you tweet it, and I think people looked at that, and if you just read it, more of a dunking on you're dumb and I'm smart than it really was, because he was saying, like you said, he was saying, don't know as much as I know about this specific situation. So some of the blame goes to me. But I would like to give more blame to Pred's Twitter because, I mean, you've been, you're so mad at Poyle, and rightfully so, the way things have gone over the last few years. I mean, David Poyle fully deserves scrutiny and criticism right now for the way things have gone. But you immediately go to Poyle, you rock, baby, because he said that to Stillman, which again was more respectful than probably that tweet suggests. And I will say it again, like it's interesting, just the whole Pred's Twitter, in particular, thing with Jared. Now, every once in a while, he'll have these takes like Jarnkrok would have fetched a first-round pick next year. What? I mean, some of the takes deserve all the dunking you can.
He's really hung up on that Ryan Hartman one, isn't he? He thinks that now everybody's going to get a first-round pick.
Yeah, that's like the justification is like and the Ryan Hartman obviously was a terrible trade.
Of course, but it's each deadline is different.
And Hartman at that point, it was a small sample size,
right.
And he had 26 goals in the 1 year?
Yeah, he played with Patrick Kane, but yeah.
Right. But so it was like, okay, well, maybe that's his upside. Jarnkrok, we know what he is. He's a very good, all-around, versatile role player at a good price, and I think he would be an asset at the trading deadline. If they had him next year, I think they'd get something for him. A first-round pick?
No.
My God. So anyway, there's takes that are certainly worthy of being shamed, but, I mean, I listened to that show. Jared knows hockey and the team well and does a lot of – I like the show, and I'll say this as many times as you can say it. Go around to these various markets. You will find people who fire cannons at athletes and teams in their town and then never, ever show up. And Jared is not that person. So I think that deserves some respect.
Some breaking news in Major League Baseball. The Cleveland Indians have been renamed officially. They are now the Cleveland Guardians, and that will begin next season. So the Cleveland Indians transitioning to the Cleveland Guardians in Major League Baseball.
So I haven't seen – I just saw this come across. I haven't seen the explanation of picking that name.
I haven't either. There's a video out with it.
Okay.
But I've not watched that because I'm on the air.
Like, just my first blush, is it you have, like, the second part of the word is the same?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
Dians to Dians?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. But Cleveland Guardians, okay. So, it's not – I mean, I can get used to that. The Cleveland Guardians.
So is the Washington football team going to come up with a name at some point?
Well, they had
I've heard Washington Warriors.
What's interesting about that is, Marquette was the Warriors and changed that to Golden Eagles because that's also it could be taken as a Native American reference.
Right.
But there are a few others with Washington, right? Like Admirals. Did I see that? I thought that there was a list of 4 or 5 possibilities. I kind of like, why not just be the Washington football team? So we had a text on our text line earlier today, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, who said, why can't Nashville SC have a nickname?
Right.
Like the Nashville SC Kickers or something. And my answer to that would be, I forgot to respond, but now I am. It's a soccer thing. I mean, it's Nashville SC. I mean, this is what you call, Chelsea FC, whatever.
FC Cincinnati, who they're playing tomorrow.
So why can't Washington football team just be WFT, man? Washington football team. I kind of like it. It's different. And then you can say when they mess up, WTF, WFT.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I don't know. Maybe that's something they'll stick with. I mean, we all know. I mean, the ownership in that place, they make great decisions all the time for the Washington football team. So
really solid ownership.
Really solid. There you go.
It's about being good people first, Yeah. That's where it starts. Anything bad that can happen to the WFT, fine with me. Although it's hard not to like Ron Rivera. That's the thing. You bring a likable coach, got some likable players.
Yeah. Washington football team will be unveiling a new name and logo in early 2022. So this could be the last year of the Washington football team.
I think they should think about sticking with this. What do you think the approval rating from Cleveland baseball fans will be for the Cleveland Guardians?
I don't think very high.
Yeah, I mean, but what, was there anything that would have been high? Nothing, because this is what they're used to, and I understand it. I mean, they got rid of the ridiculously racist logo a long time ago. That was good, but Cleveland Guardians. I want to read about exactly how they came to this, but it's interesting.
It is interesting. Let's go back to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Chris texting in, is it just me or is Twitter just a cesspool of angry individuals? It is not just you.
That's the first time I've heard that.
That's what Twitter is.
You may be onto something.
Yes, might be.
And if I could someday, I may just die before this happens. But if I don't die before this happens, someday I'm going to enjoy a part of my life where I'm just totally not on Twitter, and it's going to be
really.
Amazing.
You think you're going to get there?
At some point, that's my goal. It's kind of like my new life goal. Is to spend a portion of my life like just done with Twitter.
Do you think you could get through this weekend without logging on to Twitter one time?
Oh yeah. No, I mean we went on vacation. Went to the West Coast a couple weeks ago. I looked at it like twice all week.
Okay.
So, but that's still a short period of time. I mean, if you get past probably a week or so, you start
itching a little bit.
But the thing is, Twitter I think is actually good as a news feed.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where it's useful. But if you could get to the point even where you just use it as a news feed, but you don't have any sort of account, you don't interact with people, you just read stuff.
Get you a burner.
It may be about time for that. How many? I mean, Jared's probably got like 9 of them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all the people like defending him yesterday. I assume those are Jared burner accounts.
Heidi? Have we determined?
Is Heidi Lou or is Heidi Jared?
Who knows? Maybe we'll find out. When we come back, we will be joined by Scott Burnside from The Athletic. We'll get into all things NHL with him, including free agency coming up here in just a few days. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the wholesaling studios, powered by RumbleOn.com. Here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Final hour of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. And we are pleased to go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in the great Scott Burnside from The Athletic. Does a great job covering the NHL. Scott, what's going on, my man? How we doing?
I'm doing well. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me this morning. So I can only assume the day will be is off to a great start. So thank you for the kind words. Actually, I'm in Minnesota, getting to hang out with the Minnesota Wild as they get ready for their draft, and was here for the expansion draft. And the draft is always really exciting, but obviously this year with the Seattle expansion draft and the flat cap, and I just think there's a lot there are so many moving pieces and so much potentially going on around the NHL. In this much later off season, if you will, and the fact that this is going to be one of the shortest off seasons ever as we get ready for the start of next season. I think October 12th is the actual official start. But man, it won't be much of an off season. There's a lot of work for a lot of teams to be done.
Absolutely, lots of work, and that work began the other day with the expansion draft with Seattle coming in. What did you think of the team that Seattle put together and the approach that Ron Francis and the Kraken took of leaving some higher-priced players off the board and kind of leaving themselves a lot of salary cap room to fluctuate and to operate with here with the Kraken? What did you make of the team that Ron Francis and Seattle put together?
Yeah, I mean, it was completely different, at least in my foggy memory from Vegas 4 years ago, where there just didn't seem to be the kinds of elite players, high-profile, big-ticket players that were available to Seattle 4 years ago. And I don't think it should be a surprise to people. I mean, maybe it's a little disappointing that there wasn't more sizzle with the kinds of players that Ron Francis and the Kraken chose to take from the exposed list. But I think it's really in keeping with his personality. He was a cautious guy in Carolina. I think, this is very much an expansion draft and an initial roster that speaks as much to the future as it does to next season. And as you point out, he's got a ton of cap room. For me, it's clear that they're going to have to add some elite scoring. Maybe there's a William Karlsson in there. Maybe it's Calle Yarncroc. Maybe it's Mason Appleton from Winnipeg. But they are going to have to bring in some more top-level scoring, as far as I'm concerned, to be competitive. But I like what they've done. They're good, solid players. I like the back end. And what they've done in bringing in a lot of defensemen, which is what Vegas did 4 years ago, they have assets that they're going to turn around very quickly. I wouldn't be surprised to see players, whether it's a Carson Soucy from Minnesota here or Jeremy Lauzon from Boston. Those are the kinds of players that other teams, I think, will be knocking on the door to add to their rosters. And, of course, Ron Francis can't have 30 NHL players on his roster in September. So he quickly has to pivot now to, from accumulating these first-ever assets to then peeling some off and returning draft picks and maybe younger players that will play in the AHL or maybe are still very much at the prospect stage. So that's something that will happen, and it may happen as early as today before we get to the first round of the draft tonight. So there's still a lot of work. It's still very fluid for Seattle, what they're going to do. I know teams are already calling them about acquiring some of the players that they picked up in the expansion draft.
Well, Scott, you mentioned Boy Calle, as Marshawn Lynch called Yarncroc, and he will forever from now on be known as.
Yes.
None of us surprised that he was the choice once we saw the protection list, but we were surprised that Tanner Jeannot was on it. And, of course, also not surprised that Duchesne and Johansson were not protected. What's your assessment of the Preds at this point? And now that this is all that smoke is cleared, that Ellis has been traded, Arvidsson has been traded. You've got two high-priced centers coming back, knowing that the club wanted to unload them. What's your near-term forecast for the Predators?
Yeah, no, it is fascinating, and we talked in general about the really high-end players that were exposed and weren't taken. So what happens? And I think it's absolutely part of the narrative moving forward how players respond to this moment. And maybe some players would be completely zen about it, and certainly, I'm sure that Matt Duchesne and Ryan Johansson were not particularly surprised to see their names on the exposed list. We got Vladimir Tarasenko in St. Louis, P.K. Subban in New Jersey, Jacob Voracek in Philadelphia. You have a lot of players who played significant roles with their teams who, when you are put on that list, the fact is your team is okay with you leaving. And I think Carey Price is the outlier there. He came to the Canadiens. They wanted to keep Jake Allen, so that's a different dynamic. But for all these other players, there is a sense of, you know what, we were okay. And in fact, more than okay in some cases, and very hopeful in some cases, and I think Nashville falls into that Seattle would take you off our hands. And I think that should be a motivator. I mean, maybe it hurts your pride and all those kinds of things. But it is the reality, right? And the reality is you're exposed because you make a lot of money and you haven't produced at the level that money suggests that you should. And I think that's very true with Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson. I think the question for the Preds moving forward is what's the next step? Have you done enough yet by moving Arvidsson and Ryan Ellis? Does it allow you to keep Philip Forsberg? To me, that's absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical that he remains with the Predators. And then the flip side of that is if he can't, if you don't have room for him, or if he indicates, I'm not really interested in being part of this anymore, then you have to move into the next phase, which is finding a place to move him and return what would be significant assets, sometime between now and the trade deadline in 2022. So unpalatable to think about, but I don't think the work is yet done for David Poile in reconfiguring this roster, and it's going to be fascinating. I like a lot of the younger players who've had an opportunity. I'm really fascinated to see what happens with Cody Glass. Obviously not working out in Vegas, and I talked to some people there. They were very down on him, but I think an opportunity for him in Nashville is going to be, has the potential to be a real windfall for the team. But he'll have lots of competition for ice time, and that's going to be up to John Hines to see how that all works out. But yeah, I don't think the work is done yet in Nashville.
Scott Burnside from The Athletic on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And Scott, you mentioned you were in Minnesota. Some big news coming out of there a couple of weeks ago when Ryan Suter and Zach Parise being bought out. I want to ask you specifically about Suter. He's 36 years old. He's been a very good player for a long time, as Predators fans here well know. How much interest do you think is going to be there on the open market for Ryan Suter, and what do you think Ryan Suter still has left in the tank?
Yeah, no, I think that, I don't think there was much surprise when the Wild bought out Zach Parise. You could see the writing on the wall with his declining play and his role really being diminished. But Ryan Suter was still playing top 4 minutes, really a freak of nature, really, when you think about the level that he has continued to play at year in, year out. But and it was a bold move by Bill Guerin, the GM in Minnesota. He's looking to change the culture in Minnesota. He's looking to change things up for a team that has, has been sort of just a mediocre team for many, many years. So I understand it. There will be a place for both those players, but certainly, and again, we talk about the expansion draft and the market for defensemen. I think about a team like Colorado, perhaps, St. Louis. They lose Vince Dunn in the expansion draft. Is that a fit for them? I know there's already been discussion. The New York Islanders are interested in both Parise and Suter. They were a package team when they went to when they signed those Whopper deals in Minnesota 7 or 8 years ago, and so could they stay connected, I guess, with the Islanders? I guess that's possible. We know Montreal, for instance, is going to be without Shea Weber, perhaps forever. Would Ryan Suter be interested in playing in Canada? Not all the players are, but I think there will be no shortage of teams that are looking at least to explore what might be possible with Ryan Suter, and not to speak for him, but having been bought out of an enormous contract, that maybe the dollar, maybe even the term is something that will be a little bit more flexible from his perspective. So he's not looking to hit a home run necessarily, but finding a place where he could maybe finally win a Stanley Cup. That's my guess, is that he's looking for that kind of fit, somewhere where he would fit into a top 4 and have a legitimate chance to win a Stanley Cup.
Scott, last thing for you here. We had Elliot Friedman on our station yesterday and reported that the Predators, if Gabriel Landeskog gets to free agency, maybe the Predators could have some interest in Gabriel Landeskog. My question for you is, how important has Landeskog been, in your opinion, to what Colorado has been able to build in the last couple of years? And if he does make it to free agency, what do you think a player like Landeskog is worth on the open market?
Yeah, it's fascinating because he is everything you want in a captain. He is much loved in that dressing room and in that community. When, in a normal season, fully healthy, he's a point-a-game guy. He's not a dynamic point producer like his sometimes line mates Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, but he's a heart and soul guy. And not to batter Ryan Johansson or Matt Duchene, but range, and I think he'll find it. I don't think there will be any issue with him finding that kind of money.
Scott Burnside from The Athletic has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. Does a great job covering the NHL for The Athletic. Scott, appreciate you taking time to join us this morning, man. Great stuff as always.
Yeah, anytime, guys.
Absolutely. Scott Burnside from The Athletic, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. And when we come back, Joe and I will discuss that rumor that's out there. Is Gabriel Landeskog a fit for the Predators? Is that an avenue that the Predators and David Poile should even consider pursuing? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Blue Raider Blitz is rolling across the mid-state to a town near you. Led by Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders football coach Rick Stockstill, this community-wide event will be guaranteed fun for the whole family. Each of the stops will include food, ticket giveaways, and a chance to mix and mingle with MTSU coaching staffs and Lightning as well. For more information on where you can attend, head to goblueraiders.com/tour. That's goblueraiders.com/tour. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Thanks to Scott Burnside from The Athletic for joining us in the last segment. And, Joe, in the last part of that interview, we talked about Gabriel Landeskog. And Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet joins Darren Donick and Chase every week here on this radio station, and said yesterday that the Predators could have interest in Gabriel Landeskog if he makes it to free agency and he parts ways with the Colorado Avalanche. Now, Landeskog is the captain of Colorado. He has been a very, very good player there since the 11-12 season. So he's been around for a while. He's 28 years old. He'll be 29 in November. And a guy the last few years that essentially when he's been healthy and has been playing has been a point-per-game player. 75 points in 73 games 2 years ago, 44 points in 54 games in the 19-20 season, and then last year, 52 points in 54 games. So right around a point-per-game player. And as Scott Burnside pointed out, maybe a player that could command $8 million or $8.5 million on the open market. Is this a good idea for the Predators to pursue? What do you think of Gabriel Landeskog, the player? Should this be something that David Poile and the Nashville Predators try to pursue with the cap space that they have recently opened up with the Ryan Ellis trade and the Victor Arvidsson trade as well?
I mean, it's worth finding out if maybe Landeskog, like Matt Duchene, has always wanted to live in Nashville and loves country music, and maybe Landeskog will sign for a tidy price that works out for you. I mean, it's worth kicking the tires, but I can't imagine that this would become a serious pursuit for the Preds at this point. And I think there is a little bit of buyer beware. I mean, I think Burnside said it well. Heart and soul guy. I mean, he's a captain there. Friedman talked about how important he's been and sort of, managing that locker room, emotional McKinnon, all this stuff. But let's also be real. I mean, his numbers lend themselves to a decent extent to playing with McKinnon, right?
Yes, and I don't think there's any question. He's played a lot with Nathan McKinnon the last few years. That's been one of the best lines in hockey is Landeskog, Nathan McKinnon, and Mikko Rantanen as well. Now, they've gotten away from it at times, and it's not like he has exclusively been playing with Nathan McKinnon. He's a very good player on his own, and he does a lot of things that, quite frankly, this roster has needed for a long time, and that is he'll go to the front of the net. He's very difficult to move in front of the net. He will play physically. He is a power forward. He's also not a guy that on his own is going to create a whole lot off the rush. And I don't know that the best strategy for the Predators is freeing up all this money and then immediately locking yourself back into a big deal. Like, I don't know that that's the way to go this offseason. And I know we've had a lot of fans text in and say, all right, you got some money now. What are you going to do with it? I don't know that the route is paying a guy $8 million a year for the next 5, 6, 7 years. I don't think that's a wise move from the Predators. Like, Landeskog to me seems like a guy, he's a very good player. If you pay him what I think he's about to get paid, which is about $8.5 million, he's going to come into wherever he's going with the expectation of, all right, he's a point-per-game guy. And without Nathan McKinnon here in Nashville, playing with Duchene or playing with Ryan Johansson, I just don't think he's going to be a point-per-game guy. And then all of a sudden you're back in the same conversation of, all right, you're paying him $8 million, you're paying Johansson $8 million, you're paying Duchene $8 million, you got a new contract for Philip Forsberg to try to figure out as well. I just don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense to go this route if you're the Predators.
Let's say he is a point-per-game player here. What is this team?
Well, I mean, if he's a point-per-game player here, what that tells me is that one of Johansson or Duchene has figured it out, and they're playing well too. Because I don't think there's any way Landeskog is a point-per-game player here. I don't think there's any way he approaches being a point-per-game player here without one of those two guys figuring it out.
And then the other thing is with Forsberg. I mean, could you look at this like an either or? Like if you had that choice, because obviously Forsberg, to me, seems very important that the Preds get an extension for him. But you could look at it like, well, actually, I'd rather have Landeskog over the next few years than Forsberg. Can't have them both. I mean, frankly, you would need both to really be any kind of a threat moving forward. But if that was the choice,
I mean, it could. But I just the other part of this is if you're him, right? Like he knows he's very familiar with the Predators. He's played against the Predators a lot. You just traded Ryan Ellis. You just traded Victor Arvidsson. Your franchise is going younger. You're getting to the point now in Colorado, which to Burnside's point in the last segment, kind of surprises me that it's gotten to this point with Landeskog because they're now at the point where they are an elite team in the NHL, and they've had some playoff shortcomings. They've not been able to get past the second round, and they are way more talented than a second-round hockey team. I get all that. But like if you're Landeskog, are you looking at the Predators right now and saying, yeah, if I go there, that team's close to winning a Stanley Cup? I don't think so. So my guess would be, and I don't know this, if the money's equal and all things are equal, if you're Landeskog, you're probably going to a place where you feel like you got a better chance to win. That would just be my guess.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the strategy you have laid out previously is the one that makes sense, which is, I mean, the priorities are extending those two guys, signing Granlund, and I would throw in signing Haula too. I mean, I really like how Haula finished things out last year. And then giving a real look at what you have with some of these young players that we just don't know yet what they're going to become. And I do think that if the Preds do sign Granlund and add him back to the lineup, Haula to a much lesser extent, Granlund is critical, then I think this could be a playoff team next year. Sure. And then you still have that space, and I don't have the doing a competitive rebuild, which means that you're not going to plummet before coming back.
Let's go back to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Donovan from Wisconsin texting in. How about a 1-year deal worth 9 or 9.5? Kind of a try and see if you like it here. I don't think Landeskog would be interested in that.
He's not doing that.
No.
I mean, this is Landeskog's time to get paid.
Yep.
And he's going all in on it, which I don't blame him. And look, there are a lot of people that are saying just what you said about him and playing on McKinnon's line and maybe a little bit of fool's gold there. And I'm sure he wants to to make sure he maximizes what he has done. Like it or not, those are his numbers. And they've been a great team. And I agree that it's a bit surprising because they just, to me, seem like a team that is just bound to go through these lumps and then figure it out and really make a run here with that lineup intact.
Let's go back to the text line. John from Clarksville texting in. Did Landeskog and Duchesne play on the same line together in Colorado? And with rumors of Duchesne and the locker room issues in Colorado, would that not dissuade Landeskog from wanting to come here if they bumped heads prior? I can't pretend to know the inner workings of the Colorado Avalanche locker room. I mean, I've been in it a few times, but I can't pretend to know how much discussion there was about Matt Duchesne in there. I know there was a lot of noise before he got traded. And quite frankly, now that we're talking about this, I remember Landeskog being pretty harsh after he was traded, talking about how now they have players that actually want to be here. So maybe it is. Maybe that is something that keeps him away here from Nashville. But at the end of the day, it's pro sports. If this is a place he wanted to be, I don't think the prior relationship with Matt Duchesne is unsalvageable and couldn't be fixed.
I mean, the Preds have already sort of, sent some messages to Matt Duchesne here in the last few days, right? I don't know that bringing in Landeskog is going to tick him off any more than, being left exposed 2 years after signing that deal.
Exactly. And I'm pulling up an article now that says Landeskog appears to take a shot at Matt Duchesne, and I'm trying to find the exact quote. Quote, I don't think it's more my team any more than it was 3 weeks ago. This is after Duchesne got traded. It's our team as a group, and yeah, I have the C on my chest, but I think generally with this young group we've got, it's kind of forced me to take another step and maybe sometimes be more vocal now. There's so many guys in here without much experience, but other than that, I'm still trying to be me, still trying to lead by example and do my job. I don't think that's a quote I was remembering.
I was going to say, where's the shot? Where's the shot?
I'll have to look through here and see if I can find it. But anyway, I don't know that that's going to be a huge holdup.
Yeah, again, I don't think it matters anyway because I don't think they're going to make a run here. But, yeah, that would not – to me, that would not be the non-starter. That wouldn't stop you from looking at a guy like that.
When we come back, some interesting comments from Ryan Johansson on being exposed in the expansion draft by the Predators. We'll get to those coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. We've got NSC Pick to Click coming up in the next segment, so make sure you're ready for that. Nashville SC taking on FC Cincinnati tomorrow night at Nissan Stadium. We were discussing the expansion draft in the NHL, and one of the things we talked about earlier this week, Joe, was how are Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene going to respond after they know that they have been left on the unprotected list? You can make the case. I mean, the Predators try to get rid of them, or at least try to get somebody to take them at that point by not protecting them. I don't think, as Burnside said a couple of segments ago, I don't think it's really a huge shock that they were left on the protected list or on the unprotected list. But how would they respond moving forward? Is they respond in a positive way? Are they motivated? How do you handle being put on that unprotected list? And Ryan Johansson was on the Hockey to Hell and Back podcast with Brady Leovold, who was a former hockey player and spends a lot of time talking about mental health in hockey. And Ryan Johansson went on that podcast a couple of days ago, and part of what he talked about was being left exposed by the Predators and the idea of playing for the Seattle Kraken. Here's what Ryan Johansson had to say on the Hockey to Hell and Back podcast.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's, with this Kraken thing, you're on the unprotected list and you're like, whew, okay. And like, there's a real possibility you could be on a flight to Seattle tomorrow, and it's like, all right, well, you know what? You just gotta be the best person you can be, you just gotta do what you do, and whoever wants to believe in you and give you a chance and all that. And that was the same thing with Nashville bringing me in. They had no high-end really center depth, and took a chance giving away, I think, one of the best defensemen in the league, Seth, to Columbus and bringing me in. And for me, it was like, all right, like I'm here for a reason. I'm here to take this team to the next level. And I was really proud of myself and the way I've played over those first 3 years where we were having a ton of success and gave ourselves a good chance to win the Stanley Cup. And now it's just about continuing to find ways to, make those people proud that traded for you and believed in you. And it's on me to put all the ego aside and put in all the work and all those habits that we were just talking about, and continue to do the right things every day to be a good leader on this team and a great teammate and help bring success to this organization.
So that was Ryan Johansson on the Hockey to Hell and Back podcast. And I was listening to that full interview yesterday, Joe, which was about an hour long with Johansson. And there were a couple of interesting comments that he had, but I took away from those comments specifically, doesn't really sound like a guy that's doing a whole lot of pouting right now about being left on the unprotected list. I thought if you're a Predators fan and if you're David Poile, that answer was probably right in line with what you want to hear out of Ryan Johansson, as now he is going to be a part of things here moving forward for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's no sure thing that you're going to get the right response from stuff like this, but players get traded all the time, right? When expansion drafts happen, there are always people who get unprotected who come back and play for the team because only one player is going to be selected. So, and again, it was kind of asked a couple different ways of Poile yesterday, and I get it. Like, I'm not saying it's a non-issue, but I think it's really self-sabotage if you respond to this by pouting, or like someone commented on my column on Poile yesterday in The Athletic, like, oh, just wait, Johansson's going to come in like the worst shape of his life or something. It's like, really? You think so? Now, granted, Duchene and Johansson, they got their deals, so they're getting paid regardless. Worst case is they get bought out. They get paid to do nothing, and that's fine. But how do you realistically get to this point to be a professional athlete at the very best league in your particular sport and not have more pride than that? I mean, I think for the most part, you may have someone who's ticked off, but and Poyle actually has said this, that actually may not be all that bad either. Hey, put up a dartboard of David Poyle in your weight room or whatever, But most people you would think would respond by saying, okay, well, I'm going to show you why you're dumb to leave me unprotected. Not, oh, you left me unprotected? All right, then. Pass the rocky road. Let's go.
Although, that's pretty good ice cream.
Yeah, it's not bad ice cream.
Well, look, this is pretty much right in line with what I expected out of Ryan Johansson. I think Matt Duchene's got to view it the same way. I mean, look, it is what it is. You're getting paid $8 million. I mean, it's no secret to those two guys. They've talked about it. They've not been productive. They've not been anywhere near as productive, just purely from a points perspective that they are paid to be. Now, Johansson talked about at the end of the season. He talked about it again on this podcast as well. He feels like he's playing pretty well in other areas, and it's not like he's not trying to put up points. People ask him about that, and he talked about going through some moments last year where he had a tough year, and the team psychologists were there. He would talk to them and try to get things figured out, and people would ask him like, "Why are you not being productive?" He's like, "Well, I'm trying. I'm trying and playing the same way I always play. Like I'm trying." But that answer was right in line with what I expected from him. I just think if you're him, you just got to keep plugging away. It's not like, and you brought up the contract, and I hear this a lot. Okay, well, Johansson got paid, and that was that, and he's done. Like the best 2 seasons that Ryan Johansson's played here, you can make an argument, were the 2 seasons right after he signed the contract. So if he wasn't, lazy then after signing the contract, it's not like he just all of a sudden, oh, wait. I'm getting paid $8 million a year. Cool. I'm just done. I don't want to try anymore. I've never bought into the Ryan Johansson got paid and that was it. He decided he was done part of this. I mean, just it does not line up with reality on what we saw the 2 years after he got paid.
Right. Now, look, there are times in pro sports when you're desperate to get to that payday to set yourself up for life. You get it, and there's just you lose a little bit of an edge. Certainly, that happens. And maybe, Johansson lost some of an edge somewhere along the way. I mean, when you look at him and talk about the word edge, it does seem like he's got a much different edge when he gets into a postseason game. And that's something he's got to figure out. But, yeah, I don't think that's going to be a concern. Poyle, I think one of Stillman's questions also was about Sissons and, did you reach out to him, after leaving him unprotected? Again, it's the same thing. Sissons has carved out a nice role for himself. He's making $2.85 million. He got his second deal, which for him was a good deal. I think it was a fair deal all the way around. I don't expect him. Does he need to be apologized to come do his job and keep playing hard? I would
hope not.
I would hope not too. It's going to be brought up more. And again, I don't think it's just a total non-story. It is interesting how people will react to things like this, but I think it's way more surprising if they don't react positively than negatively.
I would agree. So, do you feel good about Ryan Johansson now that you've heard these comments that he's going to put up 65 points this year?
Well, I don't know about that. Can he put up 65 points with this team? Is he? That's the thing. Is are Johansson and Duchene going to be together a lot of this year? That's a lot of reliance on each other.
It is
to rise to the occasion and raise their level of play.
It is.
But
is Granlund going to be a part of that?
That to me is the playoff. That's the playoff line in the sand for me. If they get Granlund, then I can buy it. I have a hard time buying it right now.
Well, I found that to be interesting yesterday. David Poyle. It's negotiations are going on, and you've got to take both sides of it. Very calculated, right? Todd Diamond, Granlund's agent the other day, according to Adam Vingan from The Athletic, described the talks as in purgatory, which, again, don't know that I've ever heard that. It's a heck of a way to describe it. And then David Poyle.
The talks are atoning for their sins.
Yes.
In fire and brimstone.
Yes. And then yesterday, David Poyle, talking about Hall and Granlund, basically made it sound like they might get to free agency and see what options are on the table. That's a dangerous game to play. I don't know. Again, both sides, take it with a grain of salt. But I did call my shot. Granlund's not going to be signed the first day of free agency by anybody.
Yeah,
He'll just be floating out there.
And then it's all out panic. It's like if you're Granlund, you got to like how things went individually for you.
Sure.
And how you fit into this system and with this team last year. But I think it's probably the same question. He's not super young. And is he looking at this roster now and saying, okay, there goes Ellis, there goes Arvidsson. Am I re-signing for no postseason for the rest of my prime years?
Right. I think it's a legitimate question, a legitimate concern on Mikael Granlund's part there. When we come back, it is time for NSC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. Nashville SC taking on FC Cincinnati tomorrow at Nissan Stadium. Be the first caller at 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 to guess the goal scorer for tomorrow's game against FC Cincinnati. If you get it right, you'll win a prize pack and a 4-pack of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC game. We'll do that next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game.
It's hooked in and headed in! Delirium! Yonder Cadiz!
Who's going to find the back of the net in the upcoming Nashville SC match? Robby and Rexrode make their picks to click for the match and welcome a listener to do the same. NSC Pick to Click on ESPN 1025 The Game is brought to you by Camarena Tequila.
And it is that time of the day, time for NSC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. Nashville SC at home tomorrow, taking on FC Cincinnati at Nissan Stadium. A nice rivalry between Nashville SC and FC Cincinnati. Joe, I watched Nashville SC take on Cincinnati earlier this year. From what we happened to stumble into was an FC Cincinnati watch party at a place in Cincinnati on Port's bachelor trip.
That's right. Wild scene, right?
It was a wild scene. We were not welcome there. Let's put it that way. But it ended up working out okay. Nashville SC with the draw in that game. The standings in NSC Pick to Click are this. The listeners still in the lead with 3 correct answers. Joe Rexrode in second place with 1. Robbie Stanley, Ryan Porth, Michelle Knezovic, all with 0 so far, although Michelle has only participated once, and that game yielded 0 goals on the scoreboard. So, difficult to fault her very much.
Yeah,
Porth and I, a different story. It's been a struggle.
The listener is very impressive. I'm trying to find this text on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com about the idea of a team nickname, because the point was made, and I'm sorry, I can't find it, as usual for me, but Premier League teams do have sort of unofficial nicknames, like Liverpool's, the Reds, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, okay, let's go with the Kickers, and the suggestion was made for the Melodies. What do you think about Nashville SC, but kind of just unofficially the Melodies?
Just leave it alone.
Yeah, you're not a fan.
No, just
something musical, though, maybe?
Yeah, just leave it the way it is. It's fine.
The rhythms?
Sure. Just leave it the way it is. It's fine.
What about the Acafellas?
The Nashville SC Acafellas.
100%.
What do you say?
I absolutely love that.
There
The
you go.
Acafellas.
Maybe that's something we could figure out here.
All right, there we go.
A little pool with Nashville SC. Michelle Knezovic, you have the first selection today in NSC Pick to Click. Would you like to begin us in the competition here today?
It would be an absolute pleasure. I'm going with my same pick as last week, Randall Leal. Because I have faith,
Leal.
you know?
Randall Leal, very talented player. Very talented player. Been a little bit more on the assist sheet lately rather than putting the ball in the back of the net. Almost said puck. But Randall Leal, he has got an absolute cannon. I'll never forget his goal against Miami last year in the playoffs. I mean, it was sick. So Randall Leal, a very good selection by Michelle. Joe Rexrode, you are now up second in the competition today. Your NSC Pick to Click is whom?
See, I correctly wanted nothing to do with Hani Muhtar after his hat trick. You know, the next game.
Right.
But now that I have the opportunity to go back to Muhtar, absolutely. That's an easy one. He gets back on the score sheet after the 0-0 draw.
So he returns home, back on the score sheet. Give me the new one. The new guy. Ake Loba finds his way onto the score sheet. I said it in Call Your Shot Friday.
I could have taken that from you.
You could have, and you didn't. Nashville SC, I think, wins 1-0 in this matchup. I think Loba scores the only goal. So give me Loba in the matchup for NSC Pick to Click against FC Cincinnati.
So if a listener wants to call and get in this and be number 4, fourth pick, we'll still let them do it?
You pretty much run out of time at this point.
Okay. Well, I mean, actually, it's kind of taking it easy on us with 3 wins already. So appreciate that.
Brian on the text line saying the NSC nickname should be the Transplants since half the fan base just moved here from California.
Ooh.
A lot of people moving here. There's no question about that.
A lot of Yankees. By the way, Mike Rosenberg, good friend of mine from Sports Illustrated, had a great tweet that I retweeted with all the response of the Guardians. He's like, what if there was a New York baseball team and today they said, we're going to be the New York Yankees? Like, what would people say? Like, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's the thing. It's like, I mean, like even like the Red Sox with an X and the White Sox with an X. There's so many stupid baseball team names.
Yes.
The Reds, which used to be
that
the
you
Cincinnati.
never even think twice about.
Right. The Cincinnati Redlegs is what they used to be. Yeah, like obviously you've got things that make sense and stand up to test of time, like tigers. You know, a nice, ferocious animal is always a good way to go when you're naming your sports team.
Yes.
But there are a ton of weird, old names for baseball teams. So let's all let Guardians grow on us. Guardians of Lake Erie.
Yes.
The
Guardians of Davion Clowney.
The pristine waters of Lake Erie. Yes. Chris Martell likes to backstroke. I don't even know where to go from that. I'm just glad I got Chris Martell mentioned in
glad you did too.
In the last segment of the week.
Joe, we've been watching off and on the opening ceremonies for the Olympics in Tokyo taking place in our studio. The opening ceremonies are not, in fact, in our studio, but the television feed of the opening ceremony is.
Same number of fans.
Yeah, same number of fans in the studio that are at the opening ceremonies. 1 to 10, your interest level in the Summer Olympics as a whole.
It's always going back. I mean, I'll put it at 8. And honestly, I've been pretty close to a 10 my whole life. I love the Olympics. I was lucky enough to cover 3. I mean, I've got a little bit of FOMO as I watched Teresa out in Tokyo. I mean, in Korea, Teresa and I tore up the media beer tent like you wouldn't want to believe, along with Steve Wino, by the way.
Yes.
But then again, this doesn't look like the best one to cover either. And it may not be the best. I mean, it's just going to be weird without fans. We've kind of returned to sports with fans, right? And that's the norm. We're expecting full stadiums. I hope that's what we get this fall with sports. And so you got protests in Tokyo, and it's a mess there. A very low percentage of the population vaccinated. You got athletes. Some aren't vaccinated. I mean, it's going to be a wild ride. And so I guess I don't have as much enthusiasm as normal, and I'm still at an 8. I love the Olympics.
I like the Winter Olympics a little bit better, but it's solely because of hockey. That's what it is. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I've loved the Olympics. I would put mine at probably 6.5 or 7. I don't know if I'm quite an 8 on that list, but who doesn't love the Olympics, right? Once every 4 years, watching different sports that you don't typically watch. Like, I will admit, I have a great amount of admiration for gymnastics. I watch gymnastics, and other than somebody falling flat on their face, it's very difficult for me to tell what the difference in scoring mechanisms is. But I still enjoy watching it. There are many events in the Olympics that I enjoy watching that I don't normally watch.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, gymnastics is just and to me also in the Winter Olympics, figure skating, again, things that very few humans would even attempt to do on the planet.
Yep.
There's that, and then there's I had to write about equestrian in Rio, and it was horses that were really doing musical routines. I had no idea. It was they were sort of doing. It was the weirdest.
It's called dressage.
What's that?
It's called dressage.
That's right. You're from upstate. Yeah, you know that stuff well. I mean, it was crazy. Yeah, dressage. Yes, it was amazing. Oh, there was this one. It was like this. That horse is actually dancing to that music. What is going on here? And even just other sports that people get so into in different countries, judo. But then
water polo.
But the swimming and in this summer, the swimming and the running. Yeah, water polo are synchronized diving.
Oh yeah.
And swimming.
Sign me up.
But the swimming and the run. I mean, the track and the pool. We don't, for 4 years, you don't watch it, but are you not into that stuff? The absolute best athletes in the world going head to head, and the Ledeckis and Phelpses of the world. I mean, it's pretty awesome.
Well, the flame is now lit. It's now live on the TV that I'm watching. So the Olympic flame has been lit, and looking forward to watching the Olympics coming up in the next few days and weeks. That does it for us today. We'll be back Monday morning at 6 a.m. Darren, Donica, Chase up next. This is ESPN 102.5 The Game.